Right. Good evening. We'll call the February Steering Committee to order. Madam Secretary, if you'd please call the roll.
Commissioner Harris.
Here.
Commissioner Cush.
Present.
Commissioner McAdoo.
Here.
Commissioner Reed.
Here.
Commissioner Rather.
Here.
Commissioner Stevens.
Here. Thank you. Members, the first item on our agenda is to consider approval of the minutes from the January 7th and 15th meetings.
I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Harris, and Commissioner Cush seconded that. Any discussion? There being none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is a discussion of the steering committee chairman per rules. At our commission meeting the other night, there was a question that came up about what's the procedure when a chair position is vacated. The rules say that automatically the vice chairman becomes the chairman of the committee. So is there any question or concern we need to address with that?
I just want to have one comment. I agree with that in that when we vote for a vice chairman, we're essentially voting for that person to be the chairman, should something happen. So I agree with that. I may be wrong about something else that's in writing, but I've been on a bunch of committees and boards over the years, and that's just the way that works. So I think we move on to the next item. Other than we'll end up having to vote for a vice chairman. I don't have to do that tonight or after the commission seats filled.
Mr. Chairman, I think you've done well in presenting. That's what our rules say. That's what we do. We move that way. I'd just like to make a motion of confidence that we follow that rule and give a vote of confidence to you as the chairman presenting that.
Well, thank you. A motion by Commissioner Reed.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Rather. Any discussion on that motion? There being none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, thank you for that. I appreciate your confidence. So now we need to elect a vice chairman for this committee, and the chair will open the floor for nominations.
I'll nominate Craig Harris.
I'll second that motion.
Second by Commissioner Cush. Any other nominations? The chair will entertain a motion to cease nominations and elect by acclamation.
So moved.
That was Commissioner Cush. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Reed. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations, Commissioner Harris. Now we need to fill a vacancy on the Conservation Board. We received one application for that. Mr. Ben Cates, would you like to address the committee?
Yes, sir. You want me to stand?
Sure.
I was the director of recreation for 46 years before I retired this past summer. And I heard that there was going to be a change in the Conservation Board as far as Chuck Clark. And I decided, since I had met with them all of those 46 years and seeing how they worked and the many good things that they did, that I would like a chance at being part of that committee.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion.
Commissioner Reed,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Cush to elect Mr. Cates to that by acclamation. Any discussion? All right, there being none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Cates, your name will be presented at the County Commission meeting next Thursday night, the 14th, for consideration at 6 o'clock. Congratulations.
And I need to be there.
You're welcome to attend. It'll probably be good if you're there.
Okay, thank you.
So-
Want to make sure.
All right, members, next we need to announce a vacancy of the 10th District Commissioner. As we're all aware that Commissioner Brad Turner resigned from our county commission to become the commissioner of the State Department for Governor Lee. That applicant has to live within the boundaries of District 10. Anybody that's interested in being in that position would need to look at their voter card or contact the election office if they're not sure whether they're in that district, and you have to be a registered voter as well to qualify for that. And that will be taken up at our next month's steering committee meeting to decide who to recommend to the full commission. Also, we need to announce a vacancy on the Industrial Development Board and the Health Education and Facility Board to fill the unexpired term of Rob Lyons. That term will expire in August 2023.
Mr. Chairman, do you know why Rob resigned?
I do not. Commissioner McAdoo, this was on the agenda, and I'm not sure, Mayor Ketron, you're recognized.
I was approached by county mayor and the new city manager, and they said that they had talked to Mr. Lyons. Mr. Lyons said that he was willing to step down because he now works for a firm out of Brentwood, I believe, selling commercial real estate, and felt like that it was a conflict. I personally called Mr. Lyons and asked him if he was, based on my conversation with city officials, if he was willing to step down, and he said he was willing to send in a letter of stepping down from that board. I have not received that letter yet, but he verbally committed to stepping down. Now, I was also informed at that meeting with the city that had traditionally been a position, and I had our county attorney go all the way back to the 70s. It's traditionally always been that position for the city manager. I believe Roger Haley was in that position previously. But there's nothing in our minutes going all the way back to 1972 or 73 when it was first created, saying anything that there was a position held for the city manager of the city of Murfreesboro.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Rather, you're recognized.
So, this is the same board we nominated somebody for in the last
That
month
is
or
correct.
so.
That's correct.
Is it possible, depending on the number of applicants, that we hold that meeting in there? If it's awful crowded in here and you can't even get in and out of the door.
Sure. There
And
won't be a problem.
this isn't that meeting.
Sure, and would you also like for us to send out another letter notifying all those other candidates, there are a total of 11 that you all interviewed? We could send out, and you chose one, we could send out a letter saying that this was announcing this vacancy. And if they were still interested, they could come and resubmit their name for this position. That's up to your committee.
Yeah.
I can instruct our office to do it.
Okay. Any other questions about that topic? All right, let's move on. Yes, sir.
Can we go back to where we were talking about District 10, Commissioner? We have some people in here that are wanting to introduce themselves for consideration for Commissioner. And is it okay if we let them introduce themselves?
Well, I think if we let them and other people don't get the same opportunity to have two chances, because they'll get the chance next month to introduce themselves when the applications are considered.
That'd be fun.
So they will be here, I'm sure, next month. The ones that have contacted me both know we're going to take this up next month, and we'll consider all the applications. And I'm not sure it would be fair if some of them get to do it twice.
Okay.
So, okay, we need to fill the commission chaplain vacancy, again with the resignation of Commissioner Turner. He was our commission chaplain for several years, and I sent an email out to the whole board asking if anyone was interested in serving in that position. The only commissioner who responded to me was Commissioner Irvin. I don't know if anyone else heard of any names or not, but the chair will entertain a motion to recommend the chaplain for our full commission meeting.
I nominate.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. You go ahead.
I nominate Commissioner Urban.
Commissioner McAdoo nominates
I second.
Commissioner Urban, second by Commissioner Harris. Any other nominations or discussion? All right, there being none, all in favor of that signify by saying aye. All right, thank you. Motion carries. Item number 8 is the property abatement on historic properties. We've got the county historian here, Mr. Greg Tucker. If you'd like to approach the table, you're welcome.
May I take a seat at the table?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Sit by my friend, Mr. Black here. As your county historian, I have tried to avoid legislative issues. But this one is so close to our interest, and what's involved in it is not of any expense to the county. So I wanted to, and I know this has come up before, I think about May of last year, there were some constitutional issues raised. I'll address them in a minute. First, let me just review for everybody what is involved here. The state has a statute which says that a county, at county, individual county discretion, or city, it can be applied to a city as well, can give a tax abatement for historic preservation of historic properties, preservation and restoration of historic properties. The way it would work is an individual with a historic property, or one they believe to be historic, would go before a review board established by the commission, which will have previously set out standards and conditions that have to be met, and apply for the appropriate status. If that is approved as to the history, the historic value, and approved that the proposed renovation or restoration would be consistent with the preservation of history, then they would be entitled to an abatement of property taxes on the amount they spend on the actual restoration or renovation. Would not affect and would not apply to the previous value of the property. Yeah, let me pass out copies of the statute itself. But that would be the operation of it. And to implement it, it requires a general approval of the commission, so we can go forward. Then the county executive, our county mayor, would appoint, according to the parameters set out in the statute, a historic review commission. The members of the commission, I presume, would be then come before you for approval as the body. The next step would be for the members of the commission to draw up the requirements and the process. And that again would be submitted to you for commission approval. So it would run through here 3 times probably before we'd be ready to implement. The cost of implementation, assuming these will be a volunteer board, is nominal. And the potential return to the county in dollars is also rather nominal when you think of the entire budget of the county. But the impression we'll make and the value of that impression as a body and a county that believes in historical preservation and agrees with what many have said. In fact, a friend of mine, Bill Frist, former senator, said a couple of Sundays ago, incentives for historic preservation not only protect culturally significant buildings for the next generation, but also stimulate economic growth in our communities. So to me, there's no downside here. Now, there was a concern in May that the statute itself may be unconstitutional. All the attorneys in the room, I think, will agree with me that a duly adopted statute passed through the legislature and signed by the governor is valid and enforceable until a court with jurisdiction with a real case in controversy rules to the contrary. So this is a valid statute today and would remain so until it had somehow gone before a court for appeal. It's been suggested that some of the opinions of the state attorney general suggest that there are constitutional questions here. That's an opinion. It is in no way binding at this point. And I note, just for comparison, that there is also an outstanding opinion of the state attorney general that our Greenbelt program is unconstitutional. But you can see the value of the program and the fact that it's been there, and as long as it is not challenged and a court doesn't rule to the contrary, our Greenbelt is constitutional, despite that opinion. I think the best parallel, though, for the historic is our Industrial Development Board. The standard in the Constitution that raises questions says that abatement or exemptions can be given only to organizations religious, charitable, scientific, literary, or educational. That's been given a very broad interpretation because the incentives given for new industrial development and for additional employee base in the county don't fall within religious, charitable, scientific, literary, or educational. It is recognized as a benefit to the counties and has stood and been used since what, the 1970s, I think it's when we first set up our board. Before retiring and returning to my home county here, Rutherford, I practiced in Washington, D.C., and we frequently had constitutional questions raised about litigation going on. I've had occasion to litigate both sides of the issue. There is a very, very strong presumption in the judicial practice that a piece of legislation that's been through the legislature is constitutional. Overriding that presumption is very difficult. I can only remember one occasion where we were able to raise a legitimate question along those lines. I suggest to you that we ought to at least take the step of getting the general authorization so the committee can be formed, a review committee, and take a stab at drafting what we would require and how we would go about it. So that can come back to you for a further review and to the commission if you think it's appropriate. This is not an unfunded mandate. There is virtually no cost in going forward. I think Bill Ketron will confirm that the impact on the budget is going to be nominal, but the impression it would give about a community that cares about its heritage and is willing to provide an incentive, financial incentive, for the preservation of private property in our community. Be glad to answer any questions, and there are others I'd like to have an opportunity to speak as well. Mr. Kelsey and some others, and I hope Mayor Ketron will speak to it as well. Did I take any questions? Did I answer?
Well, I have a few questions. So we talked about this about 9 months ago, like you said, and you quoted the section of the Constitution where it says that these property tax breaks and so forth can only be used for religious, charitable, scientific, literary, or educational. And Mr. Mitchell called me a few weeks ago, and I suggested the best way to do this, to be sure we don't get sued, is to ask the state legislature to do what they did for the senior property tax freeze, which is just amend it and put it in the Constitution. And then I'd be more than happy. I think it's a great idea, but I am very hesitant to move forward with this, not knowing what the outcome's going to be. If you have a house that's 75 years old and you get a property tax break for that or an abatement on doing your renovation, what about the neighbor's house that's 68 years old but does a renovation and they don't get a tax break?
I'm not sure how we would be screwed, because first off, we don't have an obligation to defend anything. If there was a case in controversy brought up that went before a court with jurisdiction, the court was going to hear it, the state attorney has to defend the state, not us. Even if we wanted to go in on an amicus brief or somehow got drawn into it, someone alleged personal loss or something, they're volunteer attorneys in town that would pick up and represent an amicus capacity. So there's no way that we're going to get stung if we'll go about it step by step. And at the last May, there was a discussion about the abatement that's given to senior citizens, destitute senior citizens, which is yet another example. I've given two others. Our IDB, in fact, if this was ruled unconstitutional, our IDB would immediately be at risk. And the Greenbelt would be at risk. I think it's worth a try. It's very likely that it would never go into the court proceedings because just being a taxpayer does not confer standing and all that. It has to be more than that. The only person involved would be the individual who applied for the abatement, and if they get it, they've got no place to complain. And if they don't, then it's the process, not the fact that it's a credit. I would ask that you forward it to the commission so we can get the initial general approval and then begin the process of putting together a review committee in the way in which it would actually operate. The only expense at that point is from volunteer time. And I think if we can do this, like every state that borders on Tennessee has a program like this in place. We really look like the sore thumb. We're unwilling to do this. And I think we can start it. We, Rutherford County, can start it. And we would, if we wanted the city to join with us, we'd have to approach the city and ask them to go through the same process. But we don't need to do that. We're talking about our own tax base.
And we're looking at what, exemption, I think it says here, what, limited to 10 years?
10 to 15, depending on the nature of it. Again, that's what the review committee would spell out, is what our standards are going to be to decide how far it would go. And if, before your time is run, the property owner tears down the building or destroys the historic value of it, he's liable all the way back for the difference that he's been credited with. And of course, it ends the abatement right there.
Or if he sells the property?
Do what?
Does it have rollback if he sells the property? Or
No, it runs, the condition runs with the property.
Runs with
That's
the property.
explicit in the statute. So the subsequent owner would take the property with the same condition, the same advantage. And I have occasion to speak to groups around the county. There's a very strong citizen interest in something like this. I'll admit that I'm usually talking to people who are into historic preservation, but there's a strong, and I would find it very difficult to explain to our constituents why we will give a financial incentive and a tax abatement for industrial development employee base, which has a significant impact on our infrastructure, and we wouldn't give it for historical preservation that doesn't affect our infrastructure. Anything else? Let me ask, Mr. Kelsey, do you want to?
Want to step up and introduce yourself, Kelsey? Thank you all. I'm Kelsey Jones, private citizen of Rutherford County now. I used to be, until May of 17, on the staff at the State Board of Equalization, which had some responsibilities regarding these various exemptions. But I'm no longer in that capacity, so anything I say is just me as a resident of Laverne speaking to you. Don't really mean to address the merits of the issue, other than the fact that as I've gotten older, I appreciate history more, and anything that preserves it, of course, is in a general sense certainly fine with me. When I came to the Board of Equalization way back in 1984, there was an opinion of the Attorney General that addressed a bevy of statutes that granted property tax exemptions. This particular one at that time was one in which the Attorney General expressed questions. There was no occasion to actually rule it unconstitutional. The Attorney General doesn't really rule anything unconstitutional anyway. They'll simply observe, usually for the benefit of the legislature trying to make a decision about pending legislation. So I would say that I don't think the questions come up since then, and that's been, what, 30, 40 years ago. The one thing that I would mention about the statute under consideration, I think there is a provision that limits it to counties greater than 200,000.
That's
Are
correct.
we
Yeah.
good to go?
We're about 260.
Okay, very good. You see how long it's been since I looked. And I'm from Laverne. So, but other than that, with everything in order, with the local approval would be the first step, and also the Historic Properties Review Board, assuming one has been constituted here, establishes its own criteria. There are a couple of optional things, I believe, in that statute. A structure that's used for care and maintenance of the property being renovated can be possibly exempted as well. Other than that, the exemption is limited to the structure that has been renovated or rehabilitated. So that's about all I have to say about it, but certainly, again, as a private citizen, if you all have any need or think that I may be of use, I'll be happy to contribute to that discussion. Also, my successor, Betsy Knotts, is the current Executive Secretary of the State Board, and I know she'd be happy to give assistance to the assessor and to the county commission and the committee as well as they make those decisions.
Earlier today, I had occasion to review the lengthy list of opinions that you made hardly reference to. It's 1984. That's the one where it says explicitly the Greenbelt program is unconstitutional. And we still are enjoying the benefits of that because it's something that's in the public interest.
They did ultimately, that day the Attorney General did ultimately support the constitutionality of Greenbelt, and it was also affirmed by the court. So Greenbelt is no longer any question or cloud concerning the validity of Greenbelt.
Mayor Captain, please.
I think it was stated on the 200,000, I think, is the threshold, and it's my understanding that this is for residential and commercial. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Private property.
Private property, and it has to be owner occupied. Is that correct?
On
Somewhere.
commercial property, no.
Yeah, but on residential. it would have
Residential,
to be.
yes.
And for any rehabilitation, it has to exceed $20,000. I think it's the way most states around us have that. That it can't just be for something small. It has to be major renovations of keeping that historical structure. Rutherford County is still very historical. I think Williamson County is jumped in and taken this to the next level as far as what they've been able to do. And now you've got...
I get tired of being behind Williamson
Well,
County.
me too. And as I told Mr. Mitchell earlier tonight, I kid my friends over there that they live in the only gated county in the whole state of Tennessee. But a lot of those old historical homes have really helped the downtown area flourish, and reinvestment into their historical zone, which we have several here in our historical zone, and would like to see those preserved. Gives opportunity for younger people who want to live in some type of historical home. They actually have more room than the modern day homes, and if they can fix them up and make them beautiful again.
For example, if someone buys a home, an old home that would qualify 200,000, want to spend 40,000 to bring it up, 40,000 is what the tax would be abated on. They'd still be paying on the price that cost the 200,000
So,
for it, and whatever escalation there was.
So I think that would be kind of minimal as far as our
Yeah, that'd be
full
minimal.
budget is concerned for the number of homes. Most everything in this county is new.
Well, I would like to ask our attorney a few questions. Mr. McCrary here? There he is. Mr. McCrary, you were here about 9 months ago when we talked
Right.
about this.
Yep.
I was wondering if your opinions changed, if you've done any more research or had any new thoughts since then.
Well, I don't, no. Really, my opinion hasn't changed, but I can restate what I think the issues were at the time that were addressed, and I'm not sure I really expressed an opinion per se then, except to bring to light the fact that there are these Attorney General opinions that reiterate the language from the Tennessee Constitution for appropriate times to have a property tax exemption, and raising the question then whether or not historic property that's not used for education purposes, for example, would qualify. They're using it for residence, they're not using it for education purposes. So that strikes me as something that might be problematic under the Constitution. The second thing I think we talked about at the time was we keep using the word abatement, but I think the statute actually uses the word exempt. And that may matter because what I think you can't do is exempt property that is not religious and so forth. And an abatement, I don't know what the term abatement means, but I've heard it repeated multiple times, and to me abatement means something like reduction. Exempt means exempt. I don't know what this statute means. It uses the word exempt, but it says exempt as to the extent, I guess, of the improvement or remodeling or refurbishing of the historic property. Is this an abatement or an exemption? I don't know. It says
When we
exemption.
speak of exempt property, we're usually talking about property which permanently is exempt unless the use changes. When we speak of abatement, we're talking about a time fixed, a fixed time when the taxes will be abated, knowing that when that time runs out, it's going to be fully taxed as
Well,
any other property.
So I think that sounds very plausible to me. I'm only pointing out that the statute, A1, says there shall be exempt from property tax. It doesn't say abated. So that in and of itself could present, I guess, a question. But I agree with Mr. Tucker that the risk here is low. The chances of a litigation over this are probably very low. And how this would be raised, you know, he's talking about standing, you've got to have, taxpayers in general don't have standing to pursue
That's
these
right.
things.
It'd
You've
be
got to
hard
have
to
a
find.
unique, special injury, and the person who would likely have that is the person making the request, and I doubt they're going to challenge their abatement, but who knows?
There are risks and there are risks. I see a very, very limited risk of us incurring any disadvantage. I'd ask you to help us take the next step, anticipating to be back to you as to specifics. And give us a chance to constitute a body to draw up how we would proceed and see if we can't get out in front a little bit on historic preservation in Tennessee.
I believe the risk to the community is minimal, but the rewards are immense, because it will set us apart from every other county in the state of Tennessee as being a leader in historic preservation, which for the most part has been a crown that Williamson County holds on to and covets. I don't like being second place to Williamson County. We're not. Yeah.
I'm gonna say something too. Within our county, many years ago, a book was put out called Hearthstones. Hearthstones.
Oh, yeah.
And Hearthstones included within it many of the old homes that was located within this county. And at that time, there were a large number of old homes within this county. All the photographs in that book are black and white. And it has, over the years, it's been recopyrighted and more homes looked at, but more homes removed due to the fact that they disappeared. The thing Rutherford County is noted for, I think, is its history. When people come here to visit, they don't come here to ask to see our new judicial building. They don't come here to see our new schools. They don't come here to see our new multi-number subdivisions. They want to come to see the historic courthouse. They want to come to see the battlefield. They want to come to see East Main. They want to come to see the antebellum homes. And a lot of those are becoming a lot like me. They're growing older. I got a letter just last week from the U.S. government telling me I'm 70 and a half years old. And I thought, well, that was nice of them to call and write me up and tell me how old I am, but it was basically to tell me how much more taxes I need to pay. But, you know, I'm sort of like you. I get a little tired of hearing people telling me how they do it in Williamson County. And I know when we were talking about our convenience centers and things, everybody told me how wonderful they were in Williamson County. I went over there and looked at them. I didn't find anything better than what we had.
Lord is good.
And so, I guess, Mr. Chairman, what I'm trying to say here, you know, I understand what we're talking about and the chance we may be taking. I think I got to be 70 and a half because I took chances somewhere. You're looking at a man here that stood out on an airplane wheel to make pictures just so he could get a better picture. And, but, you know, I can see what you're looking at right here. There are possibilities of what we may have to do, and you may have to bring this back to the drawing board several times, more than 3 times or whatever. But I would like to give the rest of the commission the opportunity to say yea or nay, or at least look at it. And I'd like to hear anybody else on here, see what you might want to say.
Well, I just have a couple of questions, and I depend very heavily on smart people, so that's why I want to approach this to you. When you say historic, define that, because I've said this for several years, just because something's old doesn't mean it's historic or an antique. If that's the case, I'm approaching over the years to becoming historic or an antique.
Exactly.
So, you know, I can think some of y'all that have been around a while, Ben Brown store out on Lascassas. Well, that means a lot to a lot of memories there. And a very, you know, as a kid, I was so excited for my granddaddy to take me to Ben Brown store, because you could get a bologna sandwich that was so fresh, the bread stuck to the top of your mouth. Now that's fresh. But is that historic? And so, let's say it is historic. Who defines historic? Is that something that's in the historical registry? Is that something that's...
The statute itself addresses the question of just age, and it says if it's 175 years old, it's automatically deemed to be historic. Beyond that, and it has another level, 150, it's presumed to be subject to review. That's what this review committee would do, would be to draw out what we in Rutherford County are going to deem to be historic and eligible for the abatement as set out in the statute. And then that comes back to you. And probably will take some kicking around and some tweaking here and there. But before we would get the first application, we would have, this is what we look for, this is how we're going to apply and interpret it from this review committee. The statute also sets out exactly who should be included in that committee: planning people, engineers, contractors, historians. There would be a group that supposedly, I would expect, would be able to come up with some criteria to answer your question for any given property.
That answered that portion of the question. So the follow-up is, you may, if I heard you correctly, and I think it was between you and the mayor maybe, so if someone tears down that building, then that abatement, you've got to go back and
You not
pay back.
end your abatement, you're liable for what you've been given up to that point, because the deal will be, again, up to the review committee to detail, but the review would be, we're going to give you a 10-year window, and we expect things to be preserved during that 10 years. And if there's an occasion to spend another $150,000, they can come back, for a second run.
So if a property owner, let's say I had a log cabin on my property that was considered historic, and considered historic by those who designated historic, not because I said so, but me as the property owner, even though it's officially historic, I have the right to tear that down?
You have a right to, but when you did, you would lose your abatement, plus the county could claim back, because you basically violated what you said you were doing, was restoring and preserve it. Yes, and if you sold your place with the log cabin, the buyer would have the same obligation you do with respect to that historic property.
So if my log cabin was considered historical, and I've not put anything into it, it's just been sitting there, and I didn't take advantage of any abatement or exemption or whatever, me as the property owner, I would still have a right to remove it there from my property.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It puts no restrictions whatsoever on the property owner, right?
They'd have to apply for the abatement.
Commissioner
But you wouldn't
Harris.
have to apply to tear it down.
No,
No, if you're participating in the program, then you take if you participate in the program and you have a structure, you're saying, I'm going to invest $100,000 to fix up my log cabin. Okay, there would be a base that it would still be on the tax rolls for. The $100,000, if it's an approved plan, would be what was abated for that specific period of time. If you deviated from it, you decided, well, I decided that I'm going to do this to it instead of what I told them I was going to do, at that point, the board could come back and rescind your abatement. And you would owe all the difference between the taxes that you had paid and the taxes that you should have paid.
It's got some teeth in it. But Also, if you're allowed, if you came to the board, of course, the review board didn't put this down, but the likely example would be, you want to put a flush toilet and something another, upgraded, modernized it, so very likely that would not be accepted as restoration or preservation.
I was just trying to clarify that as a property owner, regardless of that cabin being on a historical registry or somebody deems it historical, I can do what I want to with it.
Understand that if you're advantaged by an abatement, you're going to get that back.
Okay.
Commissioner Harris,
I appreciate that.
recognized.
This is new, so I'm trying to understand stuff, so it's a lot at one time. So if somebody buys an historic home and they want to put money into it and fix it up, now it has to be close to what, the original, the way it was 175 years ago? Or is it just mad they can modernize it?
The review committee would set out standards, and I would expect and would advocate if I was on the committee that modernizing for contemporary use is not preserving or restoring. It needs to be, you're taking it back and within reason of better roof and things like that, we're going to preserve it. Okay.
Who's going to inspect that? Are y'all going to have the power to come in there and inspect it during construction and all that?
I believe the statute gives that authority.
Does give you that?
But that again would be part of what the county would put into their historic review requirements.
But you're saying that's no cost to the county?
They have codes inspectors already that go out and review that for.
Well, the cost would be the revenue we would not get from taxing the value or the cost of the improvements.
Okay, I'm confused. So you're saying we have codes enforcers, right? But they're not, their job's not to see if something's being, restored or whatever. That's not their job. So who's going to do that part
I
of
could easily
it?
see in the review committee setting out that the homeowner must agree to subsequent reviews on a periodic basis or on a notice basis. Should there be a question about whether in fact the property is being preserved.
Okay.
That's why I say right now it's an open book. Give us a chance to sit down and put some specifics and details on it, which the statute says we don't do until the commission is checked off the first approval.
Well, can we do this? I really like the idea of this. I just don't want to get us into a lawsuit. Could we send something to our state legislators and ask them to change the Constitution like they did with the senior tax freeze program in conjunction with moving forward, setting up the regulations here now? I do think the risk of us getting sued is minimal, but I don't want to move forward unless we're also asking that the Constitution be changed as well.
Mr. Chairman, that could be done at the same time while we're working towards it, if we could get the approval of the commission. But a constitutional change.
It takes about 4 years.
Years. We'd be sitting here and probably I wouldn't be here. I'm older than Pettis.
I wasn't gonna say that.
Well, I would be more willing to support it if we were doing both things together. If it's just setting up the committee, I'm hesitant
No problem at
to.
all with that. I think that'd be good.
Was there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion to move this to the full commission, adding to it the fact that we go ahead and move that change in the state constitution with our legislative delegation.
Okay.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Rather. Any other discussion? Let's call the roll on this one.
Move this issue to the commission and move to change the state constitution through the state legislature.
Correct. So everybody understand the motion? All right, call the roll.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Cush,
Yes.
Commissioner McAdoo.
Yes.
Commissioner Reed,
Yes.
Commissioner Rather,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yes,
And this will be at the next commission.
this will be brought up at our full commission meeting.
Gentlemen, lady, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, item number 9 is a request to add school board member to the insurance committee. Ms. Lisa Moore brought this to my attention, so I'll let you and whoever's with you come forward to the table, please. And while she's up here, I did some research today on our current makeup of the committee. So if you'll pass these, that's 3 pages for everybody. So 1, 2, and then it gets to the legal size page.
Oh, okay.
Top 3 goes to each person. Ms. Moore, you're recognized. Would you like to have a copy?
I'm going to let Mr. Young go ahead and kind of lay this out for you all, and they can certainly answer any questions the commission has, but thank you for having us.
Okay, Mr. Young, you're recognized then.
Thanks, Chairman, Steering Committee, for allowing us to give them the agenda tonight to discuss this. This is something that we've been asked from our school board to talk to you guys about. Considering that we have 80% of the employees in Lower County, we feel like it would be adequate if we could add 1 school board member to the insurance committee. And, we'd just like to hear your thoughts and see what you guys think of that.
Mr. McAdoo.
I guess I'll start officers on that committee. I myself personally wouldn't have any problem having alternates and keeping the same number. And the reason being, you say that you got that many employees. Well, the full commission got the entire budget, but we only got 3 members on that committee. And I think that needs to be pointed out. And alternates I could go with. Keeping the same number of individuals with alternates. And the committee has operated like this for several years, I think. And let's take for an example, the road board. The road board have several employees, but they only have 1 representative. I'm not, wrong, but I think I'm right on that. And that's, if anybody need more members, it would be the commission, because we just went through a policy of setting that insurance rate, you remember? And it wasn't pretty at all. And there's 3 poor little commissioners catching flack from everybody in the county. And so, looking at the monetary standpoint, I think it should stay like it is, and if we want alternates, let's use alternates.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I do.
You're recognized.
One of the things that I looked at that I'm concerned with is we have 3 members of the BOE now, right? Board of Education, or associated with Board of Education, 3 members now?
You have 2 from the school board, and then you have 1 from REA.
Okay. But they represent education, right?
Yeah, of course, your REA represents specifically the teachers, and then our
Sure.
central office staff, financial and HR.
Well, kind of what I'm looking at is when I met you and went before the insurance committee, I didn't meet the people that was representing the education. So I kind of looked up attendance. And one of the things that really concerned me is that out of 15 meetings dating back to January 2017, only 40% of the time was everybody there at the same time. So that's concerning to me. And I think my opinion is that instead of adding, I think we need to be proactive in getting more participation. And I think that's how I feel that. So I kind of feel like we have, in my opinion, enough as it is. But I do agree with Commissioner McAdoo. I have no problem with alternates at all.
Any other, Ms. Moore, you're recognized.
Commissioner Harris, yeah, just a question. When you talk about the representation, and I appreciate you going back and pulling those facts, are you referring to all of the committee members at large, or are you referring to the school system
No,
or board?
just the school
members?
system. Just school system.
Okay.
Did you get to see this sheet that was handed out? I think it's got the attendance for each of your 3 representatives at the last
Here you go.
2 years' worth of meetings.
Thank you. I did, but looks like mine was blank. So, thank you for that.
Do you feel like the current needs of the school board aren't being met or aren't being represented well with the current makeup of the committee?
Well, the thing, we have to answer to our constituents also. And we don't have a school board member on that committee. And insurance is one of our largest budget items too. I mean, when we talk dollars, we got a huge dollar amount in that budget for insurance. And we have a lot of questions that come through. And we just like to have a seat at that table to talk about it.
If you want to sit here at the table, you got 3 members now. Why don't you remove one of them and put a school board member on there?
That's something we can definitely consider.
I have no problem with that.
Me as well.
Well, I'm not sure if they can do that. It says,
Why not?
here's the resolution that created the insurance committee. I got this from the clerk's office earlier. But it says that there's 5 employees of Rutherford County, including 2 employees from the Board of Education to be selected by the school superintendent. So I don't think that the school board members will qualify as employees. And then, of course, they have the 1 member of the Rutherford Education Association, so that wouldn't be a school board member either.
Well, why can't the insurance committee change that makeup?
Well, the commission would have to vote
Well, that's us.
to change it if you wanted
we
to
can
do that. You could say that if you want to keep the same number, you just have to say that the school director or the Board of Education picks 1 employee and 1 school board member.
Right,
If you want to do it that way.
right, and we can do that.
And then they'll have to decide who doesn't get to go to the meetings anymore. And I guess if that's the direction we're going to go, my suggestion would be the one that doesn't attend the meetings the most.
Who would decide, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're recognized.
Who will decide to ask that person to step down and replace it? Is that gonna be the director of schools, or is that gonna be the commission?
It says 2 employees from the Board of Education to be selected by the school superintendent. So I guess that would be his decision on which one would no longer be a member. And are those people put in there for a term of office, like for a 2-year term, or do they serve at the will of the director of schools?
I can't answer that for the school board.
Because if we voted to give them, to give them a term for like 2 years or 4 years, I'm not sure that we can just take that away from them. But if they serve at the pleasure of the school superintendent,
They serve at the pleasure of the school board superintendent, because the county commission, the way we got ours set up, is that the county mayor appoints the commissioners to be on that insurance committee.
I can't remember us ever voting on a school
No,
board.
county, no, we haven't. Never.
So I would think that the person serves at the will of the superintendent.
Superintendent, like we do with the county mayor.
So would that be something that works for you if we change that and take one of the individuals from the employee and make it a school board member?
You know, Commissioner, I think that that's really probably something that we as a board would need to discuss, because it's not a thought or an idea that we'd entertained up to this point. I will tell you this, and certainly, and obviously I understand your concerns about the attendance, and I also understand and respect the Commissioner's concerns about the size of the committee in of itself. But again, I just kind of like to emphasize, and I know that all of you understand this, that the school system employs 80%, or close to 80% of the employees that are in the system, and that insurance committee, large responsibilities, no doubt, responsibilities for workers' comp, human resources issues, those sorts of things, but at the end of the day, the employees' health care and insurance is the biggest piece of that budget, no doubt. And I think that the staff that we currently have serving on that committee, Dr. Anthony, our Human Resources Director, as well as Jeff Sandvig, our Director of Finance, I think their roles are pretty key and critical when you look at what they do from that perspective of the insurance. And I know that they both bring a lot to the table. So I don't know, as far as eliminating one of those positions, I think we as a board would have to discuss that. We'd have to discuss it with Director Spurlock before we can. I wouldn't feel comfortable answering that on behalf of the board this evening. But again, based on all of those considerations, I still would request and think it's appropriate, would be appropriate for us to add another seat that a school board member would sit in at that committee. So with all due respect, I would stick with that for now, and I'll defer to the board, and we can come back certainly if that question needs to be answered.
Any other questions from the committee, or what's the will of the committee?
I would entertain an alternate, as Commissioner McAdoo recommended. I'm not ready to put a full-time person on.
Well, why don't we do this? Would you be willing to go back to the board and discuss if changing out one of the employee representatives to a school board representative would be acceptable? And if that's something that is willing for the school system to do, then we could change the resolution next month or the month after that, if it's not enough time to get it done. And if that's not acceptable, come back and we can see what other options we might have then.
And just to clarify, if the alternate position came into play, that would be a non-voting person, unless perhaps somebody was absent from the meeting, they would fill in and then have full voting rights for that person. Is that correct?
Well, if that's how you wanted to set it up, that's one way it could be done.
Isn't that normally how it works?
That's normally how it works.
Yeah.
But then with the alternate having the opportunity to still, even though no voting rights, but to
They
be able to
attend.
be at the table and give input on behalf of the board, because I think, and that's, obviously one of the concerns is that we have the opportunity to really be able to express the things that we're getting back from our constituents, and most especially our constituents that are employees of the Rutherford County School Board, and the concerns that they bring to us regarding insurance and benefits specifically.
When that time for a motion would come up, I would certainly make that part of the motion. That they certainly have a chance to sit at the table and discuss. They just would not have voting opportunities unless they are actually filling a vacant spot for an absent operator.
Up until,
If that meets our county.
Commissioner Rather?
up until a couple of years ago, BZA had 5 voting members and 2 alternates. And due to various reasons, thank goodness the BZA went from 5 members, 2 alternates to 7 members. I think it's a whole lot better than it was. However, to answer your question, I was an alternate. And so there were certain times I was just hoping the voting member didn't show up. There were other times where I was really hoping they all showed up, but I still got to ask whatever questions, make whatever comments, but I couldn't make a motion nor vote. But, I mean, you're still as much a part of the conversation as the voting members, is the way I understand the alternate position.
Appreciate that, Commissioner Rather, thank you. And yeah, certainly, and as far as our current representatives, with our Director of Finance and HR, I don't think that the vote itself would be an issue where we would not be in agreement with them, because certainly the board can speak with them about those matters before they come to the meetings.
Sure. Mr. McAdoo?
Serving on that committee. Now, if a school board member ever showed up to that committee meeting, we could always suspend the rules and let them speak. And I don't think, since I've been on that commission, which has been a little while, that we have ever turned down any group, any individual from speaking to the insurance committee. So if that, you got that privilege to do that now. Take that back to the school.
Any other questions from the committee? So we're going to wait to hear back from you on what the school board's desire is on that, and we can move forward like next month or the following month. Does that work for you?
Sure, I believe we have a board meeting is it next Thursday? I believe it's the same night that you all have full commission meetings.
So we can talk about it at our March steering meeting then. Whatever you decide, we can consider
Perfect.
next month then. So we'll be sure that gets on the agenda. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, committee, next item is number 10. This is from Commissioner Harris about health insurance for county commissioners. And Commissioner Harris, I will turn it over to you.
One of the things that I've asked, Sonia, can you come up, please?
Yes, sir.
All this is I've simply asked that county commissioners be able to buy into the group. There'd be absolutely no cost to the county at all. Simply is just, we're asking for an opportunity for the commissioners to be able to be included into the group. I've talked to, and I want Sonia to go through, we had some questions from the insurance commission, and we have looked them up and answered them. But I also wanted to understand, because I think someone put up that it might be adverse to the group into the rates. And we talked to Cigna and we talked to Mercer, and they have all sent back telling us that it absolutely has nothing to do with rates. It would not be adverse to anything. So they said there was no problem whatsoever with it at all. You want to go take it from here?
Well, I was going to ask, could Lois Miller, she is the interim insurance, and she may be able to answer some questions that I wouldn't necessarily be able to answer. And I wanted to give you, this is just a summarization of the findings of the survey. I need one of those for Lois, that's all.
Sorry.
Thank you. What I did is, at your request at the last meeting, I had my team, we pulled together, we polled all of the other 94 counties, and polled the other 94 counties just to see, to kind of look at several different things. What are they, what benefits are they offering, and at what cost they are being assessed, whether the commissioner is paying the full premium or if the county is paying a portion of the premium. And so went through that, and this is just really a snapshot of those findings. 2 of the counties refused to respond to the survey at all. 9 of the counties didn't call back. 22 of the counties said that they offer life insurance benefits, which we already offer those benefits to our commissioners. And I believe Lois researched to find that some of our commissioners were not currently participating in that benefit. So if you are already not participating and you want to, you need to reach out to me.
I'll bring up one point. That in the past, you say commissioners not participating in that, and that some commissioners have a spouse that was employed by the county that carried that life insurance. So therefore, the commissioner was not able to carry the life insurance if the spouse was carried.
Well, under it, you can have a spousal benefit or you can have the employee benefits. You can have an employee and a spousal benefit. Overstate or misstate, so you have the opportunity to purchase that either way. So it doesn't mean that you couldn't participate as a commissioner. You could participate as a
Well, that's
commissioner.
what I was told.
It's written in a summary plan document. I pulled it to see.
Now, they're individual life plans, and so one wouldn't necessarily impact the others. Both people could have their own individual life plan.
So I don't mean to interrupt, but there was once upon a time
I know about it.
a thing where there was an automatic $25,000 employees got, and 2 employed people could not cross insure. So that may not exist now, but that did exist a few years ago. It came up in something once upon a time, and I recall that.
So now it's $35,000. And so the rate is $35,000, but what I was speaking to is the supplemental insurance, and on the supplemental insurance, the employee can purchase for themselves and the spouse, and vice versa. That's already an option. But the 25 was rated as 35, and so that's probably what Josh is talking about.
Maybe, but the thing I'm talking about was only if both people were county employees. You couldn't cross-insure if both were county employees. So if you were a county employee and your spouse wasn't, that was fine. But if you were both county employees, you couldn't cross-insure. Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I'm
That
talking
did
about. And
exist
at
for a
that
period.
time, they were looking at the county commissioners being a part of the county employee status. So therefore, if they had a wife or husband that worked with the relevant county, then only one could do it.
I'll have to go back and look, but I think that's being allowed now, but I'll have to look just to make sure.
And then according per the TCA, you're not considered an employee as part of the county commission. So then, therefore, if you don't meet the standard of being a level of a quote-unquote employee, you couldn't have 2 employees on the same plan. Yeah, we'll take that away.
Commissioner Harris, did you have another question?
Go ahead,
Okay.
son.
So then the next piece is 36 counties were offering medical, dental, and vision plans, and that's on the next page. Highlighted those counties, with what they were offering, what plan they were under. whether the commissioner was paying the full premium or a portion of the premium, or the county was paying a portion of the premium. The next page, there were 8 counties who were, of those counties were offering also to participate in TCRS, which is our pension plan. And then there were 2 counties who were not offering medical, but they did offer dental and vision only. Checked with, between Josh and Lois and myself, checked with the state code, the county rule, CTAS even weighed in on this and said that they could not find anything that would prohibit the county from implementing this program now. I did reach out to Empower as another benefit, that is our 457 and our 401k, to see if commissioners could participate, and they have not got back to me yet, so I can't report to you that on that as it is now. Lois did research the COBRA. COBRA rules would apply to this benefit just like it would for anybody else who, for whatever reason, you were no longer a commissioner. The COBRA would be offered at that point in time for the next 18 months. The term ends. The plan rules would be outlined as they are for participants as it is now. So all the criteria that's meant to participate in the plan would be the same. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Ms. Hickerson brought up about the spouses, if I'm remembering right in the meeting, the spouses being only able to participate if they didn't have the other benefits through their own employer. So those type criteria would be the same applied to the commissioners as it would be to the current participants. So like, if your spouse has access to an insurance plan through their own employer, they would still be required to participate in that plan. Just like it would be for like the dependent verification and those type things, that they would be required, you would be required to provide dependent verification in order to be able to stay, keep your dependents on the plan as well. Would have to update the summary plan documents for the medical, dental, and vision, and really any of the other supplemental plans as well. The only supplemental that already had it in the plan document was the life insurance that we reviewed. The next portion at the bottom is the full premium, which has the full premium, and then also COBRA rate, so that if anything happened, anybody ceased to participate or ceased to be a commissioner, then they would be offered the COBRA rate. So those are the rates that are given below.
Mr. Chairman, what I want everybody to understand, there is precedent in this. The state legislature does it now, the state senate does it now. All I'm simply asking is the opportunity to be able to obtain insurance through the group. Absolutely no cost to this county whatsoever at all. So I want to make sure we understand that, because I don't want people to think we're getting some benefit of money, because the county is not participating at all. This is 100% commissioners participating in that. That's all I got. If y'all, if you have any, I'd like to hear, up for discussion, if there is any.
So if a commissioner chose the member plus children, and that member's stipend was only $1,000 for the month, they would have to pay the other $199.97 in.
Well, we would recommend that, as opposed to currently how it works is it comes out of the employee's paycheck. We would recommend doing it as a ACH bank draft. And the reason being is because that does put that little risk management employee at a disadvantage if they have to call up a commissioner and say, I haven't received your insurance payment for this month. So we wanted to remove that from them. We didn't think that would be fair for those. That would be uncomfortable for them to have to reach out to a commissioner and say, I'm going to need some money, or I'm going to have to cut you off. So we would recommend the ACH for that. Now, the supplemental plans, anybody who participated in that would have to be a payroll deduction, but most of those would not come anywhere near what your monthly stipend would be.
And I'd like to mention one thing. One of the other points brought up during the insurance meeting was the risk to the plan itself. We are a self-funded entity, so we're responsible for our own claim dollars. Once we learned that this particular coverage could just be a separate class of eligibility within the plan, and it would share the same contribution, or they'd be voluntary, but they'd share the same other plan rules. So that melds the folks from the county commission and the road board and school board, if they were chosen to participate as well, into the actual risk of the plan. Well, this plan has over 6,000 subscribers and over 12,000 members. So it's a pretty big pool for the risk. And so I know there was concern over adding people that would add risk to the plan, but the plan is big enough to support that.
So if a commissioner ends up getting cancer or something like that and has $200,000 in medical bills, the plan's big enough to absorb that cost based on the premiums that will be paid in by the commissioner.
Well, not that specific cost, no, but the plan itself, there's other people who have large claims as well, and the plan is supporting that.
But all the healthy people's premium that's not being used for
Correct,
benefits would help
correct.
support that.
But the ratio of the severely ill to the relatively healthy probably would not be changed by the number of people that would enroll in the plan.
Commissioner Rather?
Well, I think y'all just answered one of my questions, because in a sense, there is no cost when you first look at it to the county or whatever. It's just the cost of that commissioner that signed up for it. However, like was just brought up, if you have significant illnesses, it could, probably would, I don't think my insurance has ever gone down, it could be a cost to the rest of the employees under that plan.
And that's correct.
Yeah. The other issue I had was, I am one of those commissioners that has a spouse that's a county employee. I think when she first started teaching, we were $150, $60 a month, and now we're well over $3. I'm concerned that adding more may jack that up a little more, depending on sicknesses and all that kind of stuff. So I was just, that would be my only concern. I am 100% behind anybody that would benefit from insurance or needs insurance. I'm 100% behind anybody getting that, because if you look at the bankruptcies today, it's because of medical bills. I'd say 90+% of the time, people are bankrupt because of medical bills. So, you know, I'm not opposed to it at all. I just kind of had that one concern, because when open enrollment starts, I have to fill out a form. It says I have no insurance available through my employer. Well, I'm self-employed. I'm not an employee at all. I don't even get a paycheck. But if I'm classified as a commissioner, if I'm classified as an employee, then is it possible for the county to say, well, you are an employee, you have to go under this group of commissioners and others, and now my rate goes up? I got to have some questions answered as to, we need to make sure that the people who currently have insurance are not affected. Knowing good and well they could be affected based on the claims from another group.
Can I answer
Mr.
that?
Harris, sure.
I thought we have from Cigna where they said this will not affect the group at all. And the word says if you need, they said, I don't see a problem with adding them to stop loss with no rate change. So that comes for them, and we can get them, I can get them a copy of that. So I've looked at this every way I can. I don't see it affecting us at all as far as county. Now, I would never in 1 minute expect the county to do anything, to pay anything towards commissioners that they're not already doing now. But this is simply an opportunity to buy into the group. We work for Rutherford County. I mean, we technically work for Rutherford County, and it's just simply, you know, like I said, just buying into the groups, nothing else. It's I've already checked it. There's no cost to anything. If we do ACH, I mean, we don't have to worry about any type of administrative other than getting it originally done. So I'd like you to consider it. I'd like you to I'd like to make a motion to send this to the commission for a vote,
You go to the budget committee first.
or
Probably money.
Yep.
I would say.
into the budget committee.
Yes.
With a positive recommendation would be your motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Cush. I had another question, and I'm not sure if it's an accounting question or not, but if somebody is self-employed and they have the opportunity to buy this insurance, does that affect their tax deduction they get for the insurance they take now? If they don't
Oh
buy
my
that
gosh,
insurance?
that's a good question.
Lisa, can you answer his question?
So I'm self-employed, for example, and I take a tax deduction for my health insurance premiums, and it seemed like I had read somewhere before that if you have the opportunity to have insurance elsewhere, if you don't take that insurance, you lose your tax deduction. And I don't know if the new tax law changed that or not.
Well, employees, I know what you're talking about. Employees get to, like on my taxes now, under your medical parts, you get to count, you know, of course you have to reach that threshold of, based on your earnings and what percentage you're eligible under medical benefits
So you
to.
can deduct the premiums
Right,
now.
and you still can, because this would still be a premium that
But
you would
if
be.
you don't take the insurance that's available to you, do you lose your tax deduction?
Well,
Because I'm not going to purchase the insurance. It's a lot more expensive than what I'm paying now, but I'm going to probably lose my tax deduction if I have the opportunity. And that's fine. I'll pay the tax deduction.
so let's go back to what Commissioner Rather said. I think that would be if you were an employee and refuse the insurance. And I don't know this to be fact, we would have to research that, and that's really probably more of a Josh or a Lisa question. But under the employee part of him having to disclose, am I an employee, do I have access to other insurance? The answer is no, because you're commissioners and you're an elected body, and that doesn't fall within the employee base, so to speak. So it doesn't make you an employee. So that's one of the criteria, and I did research that because Commissioner Rather had reached out to me and asked me to research it, so I did. And under the state code and also the other, you're not classified as an employee.
And if it's 100% funded by us, I don't see how that comes into play. Only if the county put in a portion of that payment, then I think what you're talking about would come into play.
But even as an employee today, so when my taxes are done, I can deduct my premiums, my taxes, and then anything that I paid out of pocket, but it still has to reach that whatever percentage is, it is, yeah, it's whatever the percentage is, it's based on your income and all your deductions, it's a percentage of that, and I'm not sure what that is, but,
The difference is when you're self-employed, you're taking your premiums off above the line. It's not an itemized deduction item, it's coming off before you get to your adjusted gross income. So it's a much bigger benefit for you as a self-employed person because you're taking off the full amount of your premium.
Correct.
Before you get to adjusted gross income. She's talking about taking medical expense deductions
Right.
as an itemized deduction, which comes out on the second page of your tax return. So we're really
And you
talking
may
about,
not be-
we're talking about
yeah.
two different things.
and you may not even be eligible if you don't meet that threshold, so.
Well, no one is eligible for medical deductions as an itemization unless it's more than a certain amount of your adjusted gross
Right.
income for the year.
Right.
It was 7%, now it's like 10% of your adjusted gross. But what Robert's talking about comes out either way if you're self-employed.
Well, I don't
Do you know
have a
the
problem with people
No, because I
buying
don't know
into
if
the
he's an
plan.
employee under the county plan, and I don't know exactly what the rule would be for him to deduct. So you
Well-
want to explore that, but I don't know if that matters for purposes
And I
of
might be the only person that
policy
fits into that.
issue here.
Yeah, I might be the only person that fits in that situation, and that's fine. I'll just keep the difference. Commissioner McAdoo, did you have a question?
I think it was partially answered.
Okay.
But right now, commissioners, whatever we get money, I think Medicare or something come out of it, doesn't it?
Of your check?
Yeah.
Yes.
So taking Medicare out
Social Security.
and Social Security. So why are we not offering the insurance to the commissioners? You know, that would be some incentive for the commissioners. So I have no problem sending on budget with a positive recommendation.
Yes, Ms. Sonia.
One of the other things too is whenever I said that the summary plan documents would have to be revised, you could outline that, because like in the insurance piece of it, it says it calls you a member, but a member doesn't mean employee because it has a classification. So you have member title, but then you have county commissioner, you have board member, and then you have full-time employees. And so that's broken out under a classification as member, but not necessarily employee. So that may be one of the things that would change that. I mean, just trying to think out loud, but.
Well, we have a motion and a second on the floor to send the positive recommendation to the Budget Committee. Any more discussion? Commissioner Allen, you're recognized.
Sorry, thank you. There was one point that Mary made at the meeting that I just think is worth mentioning, and that is this could potentially be a PR nightmare for us as commissioners because, and for the new commissioners, you don't know this, you didn't experience this, but 2 years ago when we elected to remove the spouses who had coverage elsewhere, to remove them from the plan, that was a very difficult decision for us to make as a recommendation from the insurance committee. But part of that was the claims experience. As we looked at it, the claims experience for these spouses was costing us more than the employees were costing us. So it was a cost-saving measure that we had to do for the whole, but it was a very difficult one, and it was a very unpopular one. And then most recently, we just gave ourselves raises. And so now you're going to have just removed folks from the plan, you gave yourself a raise. Now, even though it's 100% self-paid, now you're buying into the insurance plan. So I just need for that to at least have been said. It was said in insurance. I think it's an important factor to just think about as you're casting your vote. And I also don't know if this needs to go to insurance and budget or just budget.
I think it needs to go to budget. My understanding from that resolution about the insurance committee was it was an advisory board, and I don't think it has jurisdiction over it per se like that. So any other questions or
I'm
comments?
all
Commissioner
for
Ratner?
it, as long as I'm guaranteed I'm not classified as an employee, and when open enrollment rolls around, oh, you have to go on this plan, because you're an employee of the county, although my wife's an employee of the county. But the question is, do I have other insurance available to me through my employer? That's what I need a guarantee on, is I'm not considered an employee, and when I write for check no, that nobody's going to come back and say, oh no, you have to go this route.
What the research I found, and of course, again, I want to defer this to Josh, the legal person, but what I found in the research was in order for an elected official to be classified, and still wouldn't even be classified as an employee, but you think of like the, well, like the property assessor who was here tonight, that's a full-time, you in the office every week, that is your full-time job. That is your job. And of course, commissioners have a full-time job. Y'all are on call 24/7. I get that, and y'all are busy, but it's a little bit, it's different is how, you know, what my findings had told me.
I would think that my employer, although I get paid from the county, but my employer is all those people out of District 3. Those are really my boss, so to speak. So I just need to make sure of that, because I think the rest of it's great. Like I said earlier, I don't know how people make it without insurance, and some of them don't. So if it's available and it's no more of a burden on the county, I'm all for it.
Commissioner McAdoo?
I myself think you should send it forward so we can put it to bed. If I don't send this forward and research this and get it as far as the budget and full commission and have a lengthy discussion and make a sound decision now, 6 months down the road, I'll hear it again. So if we send it on forward now and put it to bed, then we're through with it.
Any other questions? Commissioner Reed?
I understand exactly what you're saying there, Mr. McAdoo. Putting it to bed is what is the problem, I think, is what we've had over this. And, you know, I totally understand what Commissioner Allen is saying there, because we as commissioners, as we sit here tonight, we're under a microscope on everything we say, everything we do. You know, we've just got through last month filling out our ethics reports and what we have to fill all of that out. I remember when I was first put on Planning Commission, I received a call telling me to come over to Financial, and I thought, what in the world they want me for? And when I got over there, they said, well, I need your social security number and all this stuff. I said, what do you need that for? I'm just on the Planning Commission where I serve on a committee. And they said, no, you're supposed to get paid something. said, I didn't take this to get paid. And they said, well, you do. I mean, we got to have all this information. So I have pretty much, served this way in what we're doing, and now this comes up to a point of the possibility of saying, hey, I could get insurance. So I mean, it's right here as far as I'm concerned with me, and I don't want to think that. Just like in that motion a while ago, we dealt with, I think, what was it, number 8 a while ago, dealing with the historical situation we had there, abatement. I had to sort of think to myself, I said, do I make that motion or not? Because everybody knows me, I'm a hobbyist historian. I mean, that's what I do. I do serve on, I mean, I'm part of some historical societies, whatever. I get nothing out of it, I mean, financially. If anything, it costs me every time I do things, but that's just a hobby with me. So I thought, well, am I doing this in the right way or whatever? But I'm doing it primarily for the county and whenever I do those things. And I think this right here has that too. So if I knew it was going to put it to bed, that would be fine with me. But it's still right here, I guess is what I'm saying. And when I vote is what my decision will be.
Any other comments, questions? So let's remind the people again, this is not going to be subsidized by the taxpayers. This is 100% funded by the commissioner if he or she chooses to purchase this insurance through the plan. And so I support allowing the people to have the option to purchase that, but I just want to make it clear that I myself am not going to be one of the ones that buys into the plan. All right, let's call the roll.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Cush?
Yes.
Commissioner McAdoo?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
No.
Commissioner Rather?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you.
So you'll have some of those questions answered by budget committee, or yeah.
Yes, sir, I wrote them down. If you think of any others, you want to send them to me.
All right, our next item is policies for appointment to county committees, and we've been talking about this for several months, and some of these things came up years ago, and we wanted to try to work out some of these issues tonight. So over time, I've kind of compiled some of the issues and topics that have been brought forward, and here's some of the things that I think we should consider when it comes to filling a vacancy on a board, a committee, or even an elected office. So we need a deadline for when these people apply. Showing up at 3 o'clock the afternoon of a steering committee meeting with an application is just not a good way to do business. So I would recommend that one of the things we do is to say that the applications for a vacancy must be submitted at least 1 week before the meeting by 4 o'clock. So the Monday before the steering committee to have a deadline for the application to be turned in. And if that Monday is a holiday, that it be due the next business day, 4 o'clock. And then we've talked about background checks the last few months, and we've got some questions and some answers about some of those, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it seems like over the past few months that I've heard that some on this committee, if not all, would like to see a background check process for those applicants. And I've thought about this in and out, and it seems the only way to make this work fairly and logically is that every applicant does a background check instead of just the one that's recommended at the very end. And so there would be a form that the person signs when they turn an application in that says they consent to a background check and they understand that information might be used in this process. However, if the person applying for the vacancy is filling an official role of that office, such as if an elected official is applying to be the road board representative on the audit committee, or if a county commissioner is applying to fill the county commissioner representative on the insurance committee, there wouldn't be a background check for that because those people were elected by the voters of Rutherford County, and to me that kind of is their background check. If somebody has undergone a background check in the past year for another position, so if they're applying to be on multiple boards or whatnot and they've had a background check within the last year, instead of doing another one, they could sign a statement under penalty of perjury that says nothing's changed since that background check was done with respect to criminal matters. And if it comes to be that they are lying, then they can be prosecuted for that perjury statement. Something else that we talked about is how many boards and committees can someone serve on. It seems like every now and then we have the same applicants over and over and over again, and we have 320,000 people plus in this county now. I'd like to see us get some more involvement if we can. I would like to see us put a limit on how many people can serve on committees. No person can serve on more than 2 county boards, commissions, or committees outside of an official capacity as an elected official. So again, if you're filling a seat that's a designated seat for an elected official by virtue of an office, that's different than applying to be on a committee such as the beer board where there's not an elected official on there. And then finally, no nominees may be selected from the floor of the county commission meeting unless the nominee made a written application that was turned in with everybody else and they went through the background check too. So no more of the spring somebody on us for last minute. So this, over the time that I've been here, these are some of the topics and things that have come up, and I just kind of compiled that today as some ideas that we might bounce around and some parameters that we might put on these vacancies to help us maintain order and also be sure that the applicants that we have are both qualified and have a good background as well. So with that, does anybody have any ideas or what's the will of the committee on which way we should take these things?
I have a question. On the background checks, let's just take the insurance board we had the other night. We had 11 people. So I'm assuming, Lisa or Sonia, costs how much to do a background check? $40. So my question, that would have been $440
It
to the county to try to get one guy out of that. So my question is, somehow we're kind of in a quagmire because we had to have the background. I think we had to have the background, but that's a lot of money.
Miss Sonia Stevenson, if you'd like to come to our table, you've probably got some good information, and so does Mr. McCool.
Josh and I have talked about this for some time after the committee, and we came up with some of the very same things that you just mentioned, some of the parameters. And one of the things that you could do, this is something to consider, is one, if you had an application and you had a deadline, and I'd moved it up a little bit to noon on the day before steering committee, that gives the mayor's office and some time if this was something that he thought would be a good idea and you thought. Instead of doing the full background check like we do, the things that your work would be considering would be like the felony checks, and as an elected official, you're already vetted for a felony charge because a felon cannot vote. And so the Elections Commission's already vets anybody for a felony charge, whether they're a voter or whether they're running for office. So a felony search, a felony offender search is something that is out there. It's public record already, and that's something that you can do. And we do felony offender searches, and we do sex offender searches through the state of Tennessee already. And that's one of the things that you could do as opposed to the full background check that we do, the full suite that we do, because there may be things that we're looking at differently. And you kind of, when you brought up the point of like who's going to decide, does this charge fit or the other, that was one of the things that got Josh and I to thinking, like, who would, I don't want to make that call for you on which of these boards and who would be responsible, but the felony is the one that you're looking at because that's somebody who should not be serving on your board, right?
Well, there are also misdemeanor theft and DUIs, and I don't want somebody that has a theft charge giving property tax breaks on the Industrial Development Board, and I don't want somebody who's got a DUI on the beer board, for example. So those things wouldn't show up on the felony search.
That's true, they wouldn't. So I wasn't sure what you were looking for specifically. I was just trying to come up with something that would say you would know that you wouldn't have somebody who is on the felony offender list or the sex offender list on any of your boards if you went that route. And that would be something that could be done upon submitting their application. It doesn't take long to do. So that was just something that we kind of thought of, that might be a good avenue. But if you're looking to go deeper, then I would absolutely need to know. When I do a background check through the TBI and the FBI, I get certified, and I have to swear not to release those records, and I can't show them to anybody. So all I could tell you is, no, they don't qualify. But you couldn't ask me, what are they, because I can't tell you, because then I would be, violating the agreement that I have with the TBI and the FBI. So that's one of the things that made it a little, hairy for me to be able to not tell my employer, well, I can't tell you, I can't disclose that because it's not public record. those records are not public record. So that's why we were trying to look at something that I would be able to give you a sheet if you were looking at those type things from the offender search. So that's a suggestion. You may want to do it differently, but I would need to know specifically what are the criteria that doesn't meet that.
Let me ask you, does not this application that we have been shown here, the new application for a committee, does it not say in here whenever they sign this in the, to confirm, it says that you will be, that you'll maybe be subject to all drug screening, background check, reference check, and felony search if you are selected, that you could be. So basically, we wouldn't have to do that until if they were selected, correct?
True. You could do it.
You could do it at any point in time you choose, as long as the candidate has signed a waiver authorizing you to do that.
Which is what this is.
Well,
That's not the
no,
application.
not in my
Here-
opinion. I think you need a separate sheet of paper, which Sonia has one.
And I put it
That
on
does
here.
nothing but talk about background checks. So when Sonia and I started talking about it, I probably did a better job coming up with problems and solutions, honestly. Y'all define the solutions. But, I mean, I started out just asking the question, can you even do background checks in this context? Because there are differences in public employment and private employment. And a good example is drug testing. It's very different in the public environment than the private environment. So I started digging around at that and concluded, yes, in fact, you can do. There is a statute that authorizes counties to do background checks on employees, back to the question of whether they're employees, I guess. But you can do them for sure on employees, and there's a statute that authorizes it. So then I got to just looking at generally what things look like out there in terms of doing this, and I ran across this several articles, law review articles and such, on this concept. It's a trend, I guess, called ban the box. You may have heard of this, but there's a pretty strong trend toward not doing background checks, not toward doing them, away from it. And they're banning in many jurisdictions the requirement that you have the box that you check on an application that says I haven't been convicted of a felony or whatever. And I guess those are for social justice reasons. I won't get into that, but that does appear to be a trend. And in fact, Memphis, for example, has very, very limited background checks on employees in Memphis, and it's only for safety-sensitive type positions. And for the others, they don't even do them at all. I'm not saying you should do this. I'm just giving you background where I went with this. The Nashville has something that limits the application of background checks and so forth too. So we're kind of going a little bit upstream in the way we might do this. Having said that, assuming you do them, which again I think is perfectly legal for you to do them, but you've got to figure out what you're going to do with the information you get. Sometimes you get information we think we want information sometimes, and then when you got it, you wish you didn't have it. This could be that, because once you get it, you're going to have to decide what things aren't okay and what things are okay, or is anything not okay. But if somebody has a 15-year-old DUI, does that mean they can't serve on the planning commission? I don't know. Maybe it does. But if it doesn't, you're going to have to think through all these nuances and figure out ways of creating categories that are discernible by somebody, either you all or Sonia, or somebody's going to have to be able to look at this and say, this is okay or this isn't okay. And that seems fairly difficult to me, particularly if you've got to then draw a distinction between the charge and the disposition, which can be dramatically different in many instances, and so you're going to have to figure that out too. And then the other thing I wrestled with a little bit is literally you have this record now, and we're public entities, so we get open records requests and all this kind of stuff. And so I started out thinking, we're going to have a record. What are we going to do with this record? Because somebody, like let's say somebody gets disqualified because of their background check, and then that's Are we going to announce that? Are we going to explain why they were disqualified? Or are we just going to say they were disqualified? Or are we going to say, you know, you're going forward from steering, but you've got to take a background check, and that's the last thing. And then we get to commission and we say, well, if they were disqualified, everybody's going to know it's because of the background check. So is that going to be okay or not okay? So how are you going to address that? How are you going to address the public information that you're willing to give or not give? What are you physically going to do with the paper that you get? I think Sonia's right. I dug around wondering about that. There's something called the National Crime Prevention and Privacy Compact, which is some kind of compact that she signs off on that's under federal law that authorizes her to get federal database information. But it says in the statute, it has limited uses, and you can only use it for specified purposes, and you're supposed to have policies around the use of the information. So the good news is that probably gets us out of the public records problem. It's not a public record under this statute, so that's good. But it also means we need to have clear policies about how you're using the information for this application. That's required under the statute. So there's a lot in my mind to think about there. If that's not enough, I might can come up with a few other things.
To Josh's point, that's why we do post-offer background checks and not pre-employment. Under the ban the box, the county removed the box from, and the box is, and I updated the application and am requesting that this be resubmitted because that was something that I missed. It does ask for convictions, and you can ask for convictions, it doesn't necessarily can't, but we removed that question on our applications, and so I think that that would be appropriate because that then puts that out there, and it's, you know, it's on an application. An application is a public record. So, but we only do post-offer, and the reason why is because that's one of the things that if you looked at the American Legislative Exchange Council, they talk about the ban the box and that doing it post-offer or post-employment. The state of Tennessee's, to Josh's point, the governor put in there that it doesn't mean that they're not doing background checks, it just means that they're doing them later in the application process. So that would be one of the things that would be the safest thing to do, but then it rises to the level of Josh's point. You make the consideration in here and you say we're going to move your name forward, and then somebody doesn't get it, then that's, you know, that puts, to me, that I think just the thought of the background check anyways, anybody who would have applied that maybe had that would not, they would abstain from doing that just because they know the public nature of everything. And that's why we came back to the conclusion of the sites that are public record already. I mean, any of you can go home right now and go to the Tennessee's sex offender search and pull somebody up. You can put a name in there. So it's not anything that you can't do yourself already. That to me is least invasive for this type environment than it would be in the full background check, and then knowing that later that once somebody that you have sent forward to the full commission. And that's just a suggestion. We'll do it however you like, but those are some things to consider. Also on this, it has the background on the SharePoint, the background privacy notice form and the background check release form, and those are the things that Josh was referring to, and that would be part of the application process, that they would sign that at the application, and that just kind of highlights, hey, this is one more time. It's on the application where you sign the acknowledgement, but this is just one more time that it says, hey, this is what's going to happen if you choose to go that route. So.
Any questions?
Yeah, well, comment, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In talking with Vicki downstairs, who receives all the applications from all of these volunteer boards, she cautioned that the commission probably needs to think deeply about this, because many times we don't even get anybody to apply for these volunteer boards. Case in point tonight, Mr. Cates was the only applicant for this. People are so busy, and you try to encourage people to be engaged and getting at least a foot in the door or participating in the community, and to tell them that we're going to run background checks. And the other thing to consider, are you setting a higher standard for somebody you want to volunteer to serve on a board than what you, as an elected official, only had to have 25 signatures attesting that you're a good citizen to put you on the ballot? So just put that out there for thought.
Any questions from committee members? So if we're going to do the background check, I don't like the idea of doing it for the person that makes the final cut and who gets voted into that position, because once you put them in and vote them into that office and then turn around, do you have to unvote them, or, I mean, how do you?
Well, I kind of laid out a process if you did that you would announce a vacancy, applicants submit to the mayor's office, if we did the felony and sex offender search, then cleared applicants then would go to the steering committee. So the vetting process in that scenario would happen before steering committee. So somebody who applied wouldn't be sent forth to the steering committee if they didn't meet the felony and sex offender. Then steering committee, and then if there was no vacancy, you just have to you'd do the process all over again. So, but if you did a background check, then yes, you'd have to start the process all over again. Although, Josh, you would ask, well, if our second candidate, so like, say it was a night where you had 11 applicants like you did for the IDB board, and you had 11, the question was asked, well, could we go to the second candidate who had the most highest votes? And we felt like yes. We didn't feel like that was a reason.
Policy that
As long as
that's
you
how
write
you're
a
going to do
policy.
it. You could do that.
Could we not?
If you only get one candidate, then there's nobody else. There is no second candidate, so you're back to square one.
Well, I think, could we not charge like an application fee for everybody?
But then they're
that applies?
volunteering.
I've got people shaking their heads back there because they'd rather spend the county money to do the background check as opposed to the applicant.
No, not at all, Commissioner. I just don't think that when you start asking volunteers to pay for something, they're not
gonna
gonna
volunteer.
they're not gonna step up.
Okay, well,
I'm sorry.
forget that one. As far as elected officials, I think it's, in my lifetime, it's been pretty clear when you run for an office, the closets are open, the dirt comes out.
Oh, yeah.
So-
And it does a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes it does. Sometimes.
We keep going back to the same questions. When and who decides what disqualifies? But I'm still, I mean, we can move forward without requiring background checks.
Well,
That's fine with me too. It made sense to me, it was brought up to me, and I thought that made perfect sense because I don't hire folks with felony records. I do random drug tests or have the ability to do it. They signed a waiver saying that they're subject to it. I have had employees that were some of the best I had, but they were going home and doing heroin. So, and I'm not saying that is this. I'm just saying we're putting people in decision-making that affects the county. I think a little more about them, the more we know about them, not everything, but the more we know about them, the better we are. Instead of, okay, we're not going to background check anybody because we don't want to, alienate this group or this group. And I think I said this the first time. I just think at some point, the dirt's going to come out after we've appointed them. And then we're going to have a group saying, what's wrong with y'all? Why weren't y'all doing this? And so I just brought it up, and if we discuss it right out the door, that's fine. I brought it up. If it's not going to work, that's fine. It's not going to work.
Well, I think what we're looking for are like crimes that reflect dishonesty, like theft or fraud or things like this. That to me, I wouldn't want somebody on planning commission that had a fraud charge from a year ago.
Right.
And so you can look for categories like crimes of dishonesty, crimes of moral turpitude, things that are just disgusting. You know, there's all kinds of sexual crimes and so forth that would be people that we probably wouldn't want to put on our boards and committees to reflect the county, to go out there and represent the county. And then, of course, if you're applying for the beer board, you probably wouldn't want somebody that had a charge 6 months ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago of serving alcohol to minors or a DUI. So I think we could certainly come up with some categories. And you had answered one of the questions I had, which was how much information off the background check can actually be shared. So if we make the categories and say when we're filling a vacancy on the beer board, nobody with a DUI in the past 5 years, 10 years qualifies. So you would be able to look at their record and
Yep.
say this person doesn't meet the cut.
Yep.
And so somebody would have to call that applicant and say, I'm sorry, but our policy says if you have a DUI or some kind of alcohol.
We wouldn't know what.
what's
Well,
on
but
the-
I mean, if that's the only criteria on the beer board, I mean,
But then you've got dishonesty and the
yeah,
moral
you've got other
turpitude.
things too, yeah.
Well, one thing that you could do is, I don't know if you write this into the policy or if this is anything big, but I mean, in that environment, Sonia could call the person and say, hey, something's shown up. You might want to withdraw your name, and then maybe they withdraw it.
And my
Might
guess
get
is a lot of the
announced they
people
were
that have
disqualified.
a background problem may not apply anyway, if they
Right.
know they're going to have to face a background check. Commissioner McAnutt, do you have a question, comment?
Well, I got a couple of things. Well, number one, if we going to do background checks or whatnot, and you saying, right now, in our county rules, I believe, county commission rules, we can commit a name from the commission floor. We'd have to go through
Change that.
and change all that to do what we're talking about doing with this background check, isn't that right?
Yes.
So that would be a big issue right there. I myself would hate to do a background check on a person, and the way our judicial system works, it still may be in the system that this person got a DUI, but 3 months prior to that, the judge expunged it, and the record was not updated. And here we are, bringing this person out and telling him this and that, and it hadn't been updated.
That's where a call would definitely come.
And we have,
Well, DUIs don't get expunged.
well, we have a lot of expungements and other things, arrests, not being accurate and all this, and the system is not updated. And here we are pulling all this information, and it's not updated. It could be a mess, but if we find some ways that we could put a time frame on it or whatever, you know, doing these background checks or whatever, maybe it'll fly, but you know, Josh may want to talk about that.
Well, I mean, I mentioned earlier what do you do with inaccurate information? I do, so one thing that I think is pretty clear is the way Sonia has been doing these background checks through this FBI database or whatever it is. That's one method, but a lot of private employers hire outside vendors to do checks. And I think when you do that, when you use an outside vendor, you're actually obligated to give the applicant a copy of the check that you got. If anything, if you use anything in that background check to disqualify the employee for employment, you have to give them a copy of what you got and explain to them they can contest it. Of course, they're contesting it with the third party, not with you, the employer. But, I mean, I guess my point in saying that is the very system itself that's set up for third-party vendor background checks acknowledges there may be inaccuracies in the checking information. That's why the system's set up the way it's set up. But you could eradicate some of that just by the phone call. And if the person said, well, I had that expunged, I mean, you could track it down or whatever. As long as there's time to do that.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to change your timeline, because I think if you do end up going this route, you're not gonna have, you're not gonna have enough time to get it done. By the time you vote on it in steering committee, and you're talking about next Thursday, I mean, most checks come back relatively quick. But sometimes it may be a week before I get, a notice back. And then if there was an error in the report it wouldn't give me enough time to call somebody to say, hey, I just wanted, to talk to you about this, and for them to get it corrected and everything else would just not be timely. And I'd like to think that the people that are applying for our boards, that we're having this discussion for moot anyways, but I'm just thinking it's going to extend the amount of time that it's going to take to do some of the things you need to do.
Commissioner Harris was next, and then Commissioner Cush.
Why can't we do the process that we're doing now? Vote for the people that are applying. And then once we agree on filling that spot, then ask for a background check or pending a background check before it goes to full commission. Instead of having all these applicants and all that stuff.
Yeah, as long as we don't vote on the person for the full commission and offer them the job, making it contingent on that background check. That's my problem. If it's done between steering and the commission and we find out something that's negative that would disqualify the person, that's one thing. But then, who do you go to next? You just have to start over from
I would
scratch.
think so.
Start all over again. Re-announce.
Commissioner Cush?
If they challenge the findings, that could draw out 3 or 4 months, and we're stuck with a vacancy we can't fill. Just a piece of information.
That's true.
All right, here's the thought. As an employer, I do not require a drug test. However, they sign stating that they will submit to one at any time, randomly, at my discretion. I don't know if that's legal or not, that's the way to do it. So, understand we've gone back with, trying to figure this out, who gets what, and we all have just recently said again that just them signing that they're subject to a background check is probably going to knock a lot of people out, because they're not going to sign up. So do we just leave this application the way it is? And as I expressed to the mayor a while ago, you run for public office, the dirt starts coming out anyway. So let's just leave the application the way it is. This is an option. Leave it the way it is. And if something comes up that causes us to be suspicious or concerning, then do the background check.
Well, then what's the mechanism to enforce the background check? Because you can't make somebody quit if they've got a term of an office.
Josh? So we already have language in there that says they agreed to do that. Could we add some language in there that you could be subject, you're willing for a background check to be done at any time while you're serving that board, and if a negative result comes back, then you're out.
It does say that already.
It does say that already.
So my thought on that is, yeah, you can probably make a policy that says anything you all and the commission can agree on. But from where I'm sitting, what always worries me is injections of unclear discretion into anything that's a policy. Because, for example, if that's what you have, who's going to decide whether Joe over here, because you heard at a cocktail party, Joe got a DUI once, who's going to decide we're going to do a background check on Joe? Who initiates that? And then you've got this, I don't know. So, I mean, if you could figure all that out, exactly how that would all work, then I think you can do a policy however you want to. But for me, when you get into lots of discretionary decision-making, which is also what concerns me about the picking winners and losers on the background check. This crime's okay, but this one isn't. Or this crime's okay. Wait, which board was it you were going for? Yeah, it's okay on that board. You know, that someone's exercising that discretion to make those decisions. And these background checks, we've got a judge back here, but he doesn't do criminal law. But the crimes aren't that clear. When you say theft, well, what if it's called embezzlement? And we put on our policy theft. Now, Sonia's gonna be calling me and saying, I got an embezzlement. Is that theft? And I'm gonna say, well, what's the policy? It says theft. Well, I don't know. Let's see when, that's what'll happen in real life when we start trying to chart this, I'm afraid. So you might do, if you want to do it, maybe think about doing some really big buckets, like anybody who had a felony in the last 5 years. Now that's easy. She can figure that out. Doesn't matter what it is. If it's a felony and it's 5 years, that's it. But if you get into all this other stuff, I mean, it just, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying it sounds challenging to me. And it seems like the kind of thing where somebody could challenge that policy later,
in court.
or the application of the policy to them, and want to understand why, who decided embezzlement was theft if the policy said theft?
The guy that got embezzled.
I can use a different example, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Or I really also think you've got to think about the difference between a charge and a disposition. Because there are lots of people who get pulled over for DUI and leave with reckless driving. And there are lots of people who probably get arrested for whatever, I don't know what it is. There are lots of domestic violence type charges caught up in divorces. There's the charge. But was it true? What was the disposition of it? I mean, what exactly are we looking at? And does it show the charge?
It does. It shows the
So
charge
that's
and the
confusing,
disposition.
maybe. I don't know.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we take the background check part under advisement for another month and think about all the what ifs? It's kind of a thing where you're in or you're out with these. And we need to decide if we're going to be in or out. And you've heard all of the different possibilities and different directions this could go. So maybe we can come up with some good ideas for that over the next month. What about, can we get any kind of consensus on a deadline for when applications have to be turned in, and that nobody can be nominated from the floor unless they turn an application in? Is that something that's agreeable that we can move forward? Or would you like to wait and consider all that the next month too?
48 hours.
Well, if we're going to do if we're ultimately going to do background checks, 48 hours may not be enough time for them to do it.
No, I thought you moved away from that.
Well, I'm saying if we're going to set a policy for a deadline, let's not have to change it again.
Wait till next month.
Okay. Well, is there any objection to just putting this off till the next month? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think we have created a good application, better than what we had.
It's much better.
And, but I think we have, we've added a lot more to it that we don't need. And I think that looking at it in another month would be much better than what we had.
Okay. So without objection, we'll have that on next month's agenda as well.
So Ben Cates made it under the wire, basically, is what you're
He
saying.
he made it through. Okay. So members, number 12, there's not very clear in our employee handbook about what an employee who has a complaint against the budget office or the human resource department would do if they wanted to make a complaint about somebody in those departments. And the issue is that the human resources department and the budget office report directly to the county commission. And the HR department reports directly to this committee by our private act, and the budget office reports directly to the budget committee by their private act. And so when we're looking through the handbook, there's not really a way for someone who has a grievance or a complaint against one of these departments. You know, what do you do? If you've got a complaint about the human resources department, you probably don't want to file that at the human resources department. And so I've been thinking about this over the past few weeks, and I've come up with an idea that I think would help us and also help the people that might be affected by the complaint. So my proposal for you, and I've got this written out here as well. You'll pass this down. So if an employee has a complaint with the budget or the human resources department, they would either make a written complaint or a verbal complaint to the county attorney's office. And if they make the verbal complaint, then the attorney would make a note of who it was and kind of summarize what the problem is. And then once that complaint has been made, the attorney would either contact the budget chairman or the steering chairman and consult with them on whether this is something that needs to be addressed or whether it's something that's, minor importance. For example, if somebody has a complaint about the budget director or somebody in the budget office giving them a mean look in the hallway and they didn't like that, that's not worth spending our time on the committee going over that. It's something that can be dealt with just calling the person and asking them not to do that again. If it's something serious, if someone is accusing an employee in one of those departments of trying to get them to falsify documents or to somebody that's harassing them or something that rises to a higher level, then the attorney could advise us either as a committee or in an executive session if he believes that litigation might be coming forward from that complaint. This would need to be put in our employee handbook to make it clear for the employee what they would do if this type of situation were to arise, because right now it's not very clear on what you do. And I want to be sure that our employees know that if they have a complaint about one of those departments, that they have a way that it can be addressed if they would like for that to be done. So that's the issue that I was presenting for you, and that's my proposed solution for that. Just wondering if there's any feedback or comments or likes or dislikes about that. Commissioner Cush.
Is there language in this large paragraph about a time frame in which the county attorney would receive a complaint and the amount of days that would pass before the complaint is sent to the appropriate chairman of the committees?
Oh, it doesn't have a timeline in there. I guess it's kind of assumed that it would be right away when they got the complaint, but we can specify that. And this is just an idea. We can definitely take it and tweak this between now and the commission. But I just wanted us to have a starting place for discussion, and you might not like this at all and want to go a completely different direction, and that's fine with me. It won't hurt my feelings. But I like to have some kind of idea for us to start with. It seemed like the attorney's office was a neutral place where they could file their grievance, and then it could be directed to the appropriate committee chairman, and with consultation with the attorney, figure out if it's something that needs to be addressed privately or discussed publicly at one of the committee meetings.
So we're leaving the county mayor out completely?
Well, the county mayor has no jurisdiction over the HR department or the budget department.
No, but I'm on the steering committee, and Lord knows I'm not up here every day to see what they do. What eyes and ears I'm gonna have that would let me know, what's going on before we go to the county attorney. I just hate to run the county attorney for nitpicking incidents. That's just me. If it's something that could be resolved without that, that would be the way I want to go. But I'm not up here. Maybe some of you are up here looking at the HR director and finance director, but I'm not. Should we take input from somebody that's up here? For example, the county mayor. Now, as far as him not having a say-so per se legally, he can give his opinion.
Well, sure.
Under the previous county mayor, we had opinions given. So I'm just wondering if that's the way to go before we go to the county attorney. That's just me. Maybe the others see it a different way. To me, when you mention county attorney, it's something
Well, the county attorney
very serious.
is a neutral party. There won't be any politics, and that's what I'm looking for, is to keep political things out of as much as possible.
I know, and that sounds good, but once I throw it over to that county attorney, it might be something that started out minor, and then it's gotten major. This employee saying, doggone it, send me to the county attorney, let me call my attorney. And next thing you know, it's more major than what it started out to be.
I got a question. Okay, it says here that you and the budget committee will handle anybody that, I own my own company. So as far as lawsuits, you got to document everything. I mean, who are you going to give that to? Are you going to have your own office for just the budget committee and the steering committee? Is it going to go to HR to their file? Does it go to Josh? Even if it's minor, it's got to be documented.
Well, that's why it says the attorney's going to make note of that, and then.
So it's it's talking about something really simple, like you said. Does he get that report, or how's that work? I'm just worried about transparency. I don't want us to get sued.
Well, that's the whole purpose. The attorney would work in concert with the chairman to decide if it's something that needs to be dealt with on a big scale or if it needs to be like a private discussion with that person. You know, if it's something minor, the committee chairman could talk to the employee that's under the complaint and ask them to stop doing what they're doing.
But
And
we still need to document that.
well, sure, and we could certainly do that.
Okay, that's my point.
So basically, the complaint goes to the attorney. The attorney is going to contact you. Who's chairman of budget?
Mr. P.
Robert P. It would go to one of y'all.
Right.
And y'all would decide whether the county attorney even needs to be involved, because y'all could handle it.
Right, if it's something
With
minor
their
and
employee.
in concert with the attorney, you know, it might be something that's not actionable, that's not worth causing a big fuss over it. And you could just talk to the employee and ask them to change and make a note of that. As Commissioner Harris says, if it's something that's big, if somebody's trying to commit fraud or, you know, somebody is really harassing someone or whatnot, then the committee would have to either talk about it in a meeting and, you know, get the employee to stop doing that or dismiss them or do something on a bigger scale. And if it's something where litigation is pending or could be pending from the activity, then the attorney could meet with the committee privately in an executive session. But ultimately, it's the committee's responsibility to oversee these departments.
Could we flip it and say, if you are in the budget finance office and you feel like you want to file a complaint, then that complaint is actually, they contact Commissioner P. If it's on the human resource side, they contact you.
Well, they could, but like I said, I just think it's better to take politics out of it as much as possible. And so if it's filed in a neutral place and it's forwarded to the committee as an action item, I would feel more comfortable as an employee taking it to a neutral place that's not a politician. That's just my personal opinion. Now, I mean, I can see your side too, where somebody might be more comfortable going to the politician instead of the attorney. But
Politician's gonna turn around and ask Josh for advice anyway.
Yeah, but, okay.
For every complaint to go to Josh, are we going to pay Josh?
well, that would be covered under our general services.
Not necessarily.
Wouldn't it?
If you
It
got
is.
to-
It is. Unless or until there's an actual lawsuit, everything else is under the general sort of.
Okay.
Well, we need some kind of a procedure or policy for someone to follow if they're in this situation.
We don't have a procedure now.
There is a convoluted thing in the handbook, but I think it ends up ultimately HR, and if the employee is complaining about the HR department, then the HR department can't investigate the HR department. So it just needs to be dealt with the supervisor, which unfortunately or fortunately is this committee and the budget committee. That's just the way it is under the Private Act.
This is a lot to do at one time. Is there any way, I'd like to set a motion to table this till next month.
Okay.
Second.
Can we even table it, or do we defer?
You can defer it till the next month. Yeah, that would be the motion to defer it. But table is to kill it, so
You can talk
defer it till
where
next
you want
month.
to and what you think.
Give me a chance to read
Yeah.
that. The report is already out there.
And Ms. Stevenson, could you send out the employee handbook? I couldn't find that on the internet.
Yes, and I have a copy of, there actually is a complaint procedure in the handbook. The employee has 5 days to complain to their elected official. So the employee actually goes to their elected official to file the complaint. The elected official then determines from that point forth where it needs to go. The investigation can be conducted by the county mayor, the county attorney's office, or the human resources office, whichever one is deemed necessary. So in a situation where, if it was the human resources director that you were looking at, that employee who has the complaint would take it to their elected official, and their elected official would then address that and find out whether it needs to be moved forward from that point on. There is a timeline. I think somebody asked about a timeline. There's 5 days from the action in order to report the complaint. And then the follow-up is with, a certain amount of time. So that's in the handbook already. Yeah, I have copies.
Can you define that elected
What's an elected
official?
official?
Well, the elected official is so any department who reports directly to the mayor would report it to the mayor. If the employee was at the highway department, they reported to Greg Brooks. If they were at the property assessors, they would report it to
Your
the
elected official does not mean your commissioner
Oh,
of your district. It means you work in an elected official's office like the Register of
Okay.
Deeds, you would complain to your elected official.
Okay.
That's what that means.
Thank you.
So if you had a complaint in HR department, who's the elected official in HR?
Well,
The commissioner.
sort of the main, well, no, I mean,
It's this body.
That's the problem.
But it needs to go somewhere before it comes to
That's the
us.
fuzziness.
You know, you can't file a complaint with me because I can't file stamp it. It needs to go somewhere where the county can file stamp it for the documentation. And so the attorney's office is the best place for it to go. But we have a motion to defer this to the next month on the table. So,
I agree. That's it.
what'd you say?
I said, yeah, I will call you about the motion. That's all.
Okay. So all in favor of that motion to defer this to the next month, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Let's see. Number 13, update the public records policy. Ms. Stevenson. We're in a long meeting this month.
Oh, me now.
Yeah. A lot of things to do.
Okay, so recently, the state, the legislation, made some changes to the public records policy. I had Lee Pope from their office come, and he met with me, and we went over our current policy. He made 2 or 3 small suggestions. I sent those to Josh. Josh updated our records policy, and that is what you have before you now.
So I read through this today. What changes were made from last time?
Sorry. I may have,
If you look at this, I believe they
I
are,
think I redlined it on here so that you can see.
What I
it
put
looks
off SharePoint.
blue lined on
That's
here.
an email address, isn't it?
Yeah, is that?
So it was, I think I wrote a copy, I didn't bring it with me. One of them was who they actually submit them to. One of the things that they requested is that on our website, so the website address had changed when IT did some updates to the website. It lost that filter, so we updated the website. And the other was where they would submit them to, and so we updated the address for where they would submit their records request to. Let me look and see. So like on, and it may be on your page, so if you look on page 1 where it says this policy is posted online at, and we updated where it was at, it went to Tennessee.gov forms. The other one is outlined in here. If you look on page 6 of it says copies will be available for pickup at locations specified by the records custodian, and that's coordinator, instead of, because all the records come into one place and go out. Item D, all of that was changed and says a requester will be allowed to make copies. Oh, that's not been moved out. We did not update that. So that policy stayed the same. The requester will not be allowed to make copies of records with personal equipment.
Well, that was one of my questions about that. So I looked at this today, spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I thought in the past you could use a camera to take pictures of documents if you wanted to come and do that. So you're saying that did not change from what it was there
That did not
before?
change. I just sent it to the records group today. Let me look at my stack, 'cause I know I brought it with me.
So I know what's wrong. There was a point in time where I was helping Sonia make changes to this. And one time in May of 2017, we discussed this issue in this committee. You were here about taking
Yeah, I made the
pictures.
objection.
Okay. And I had a version that had that in there from that discussion. And I took it out, but I think what Sonia may have loaded onto the point here is the version before I fixed it. So the one you're looking at is not the last version. You're looking at the wrong.
Because I thought, because I know I made an objection to
It's
that.
not in there.
It's not.
So that they can still use their phone or...
No, they cannot. They cannot use
No,
their
they
phone.
cannot.
They cannot use their phone.
Well, here's my problem with that, and it's the
Okay.
same thing I complained about
I
before.
understand.
So this is the TCA. In all cases where any person has the right to inspect public records, such person shall have the right to take extracts or make copies and to make photographs or photostats of the same while such records are in the possession of the authorized person. That they have a right to do that. Now, and I know the next paragraph says that the custodian can adopt and enforce reasonable rules governing the making of such copies, photographs, and so forth. So if the state law says a citizen has a right to do that, we can't take that right away.
Okay, but that's what the Office of Open Records sent me and said that they do not.
Oh, I know, I read an article today about this online and
Okay.
and said that that's what their policy is, and a lot of counties do that, but that doesn't mean it's right. The law says you have the right to take pictures while these are in your possession. And so this county commission can't take away a right that's granted by state law. Now, we can put rules on there. If somebody comes in and they want 150 pages and they want to take pictures of that, you could put a rule on there that says they still have to pay for the copies that you made before they take the pictures. And
Does it say photostatic or photocopy?
photographs or photostats are the same. So if they come in with a cell phone and want to take a picture of a 3-page document and not pay a fee, they can do that. That's what it says. It's a state right. And we don't have whatever the state policy says, this policy does not override the state law. And that was my objection before. And I thought we had made it to where they could take pictures with their camera in the past.
Yeah, so I actually thought that too, but I asked Rick Spence to research that because I think that was debated in May of, it was like 2 months after the policy was passed. And I had Rick look for that resolution, and he could not find the resolution where that change was actually made. So that's why it was not implemented. It should not be on the version that's in front of you. So that's the best I can tell you. Because in my memory, it was debated here over about 2 months, and I thought y'all passed it to allow.
That was my understanding.
But Rick Spence could not find the resolution.
Yeah, this clearly says you can't do it with a phone or
Now,
camera under device.
There was
This
a
is the
debate
correct
a couple
one.
of years ago about adding the language that Commissioner Steve was talking about, where you could take it with a phone.
Well, I can't remember what we did with that, but I know I brought up the same point, that this county commission can't take away somebody's state-given right. That's just the way it is.
You will not be able to make copies or reflection. You will not do that.
The correct version's on here. This is the one I was reading from.
Now, it says you can put rules, reasonable rules governing the making of such extracts, copies, photographs, and photostats. So if you run 1,000 pages for somebody and they want to come in and take a picture of every single one, you could say, well, if you do more than 10 pages, I think that's your limit now
10.
before you charge them, is it 10 black and white pages? Regardless if you take a picture on your phone or buy the hard copies, you still got to pay if it's more than 10.
Right, and once they get the 10 pages, and I think I put that in the email to you, is once they get the 10 pages, I mean, if they want to sit there with their 10 pages and take a picture, they could. It's just that if it's the more than,
Well, you can put rules and still like charge them the same amount of money because you're going to have to make the copies for them to take a picture of it. But if it's something as simple as, getting a book off the shelf and just letting them take a picture of the book, I just don't think we can take away a state-given right. And I know we've talked about this before, so I'm not sure if the commission passed that or if it just didn't get in the thing we passed, but I'm not going to vote for this unless it has that in there. So that was the only change that I would want to make, is that they can take a picture if they want to, but if they exceed the 10 pages that you give them for free, now they still have to pay for any copies that you make above that.
and that's
And that to me is a reasonable rule, but just to say you can't do it is not a reasonable rule.
Okay, so
Oh, which one?
my copy.
That one's mine.
the one that we should be looking at, it says they're allowed to take pictures.
I thought you were looking at the.
No, I
No,
was looking
mine
at the red
says you
line.
cannot,
That's-
will not be allowed to.
Yeah.
He wrote some language in here where if that was wanting to be added in, Josh has language that it could be, the requester will be allowed to make copies of records with personal equipment, and the requester will be allowed to make photographs of records with a telephone, smart device, other camera, or photo-taking device. If copies are required for redaction, then fees may or may not still apply under Section 6, as may be applicable based on guidance from the Tennessee Office of Open Records Council. That was the language that he put if you wanted them to be able to take with the picture, with their camera.
Why would we not allow them to do that? I mean, years ago, when it, or a couple of years ago.
What happened 2 years ago was the original policy did not allow that.
Right.
Did not allow picture taking. And our original policy was based on the forms that were promoted by the Open Records Council. And it did not allow it. The form from the Open Records Council did not allow it. But they're constantly issuing opinions from the Open Records Council. At some point, that became an issue because people wanted to go in and be able to take pictures of things. It came to steering committee in 2017. That specific issue, I don't remember how it came up, but I remember it came up. And it was debated here, maybe over 2 months, I think. It was like a big deal. Are we going to let people take pictures or not? And here's where the confusion is, right, as we sit here at this table, which is going to result in me, unfortunately, suggesting if it matters to you, we need to bump this. Because here's exactly what happened. Sonia talked to Lee Pope, who's the Open Records Council in Nashville. He looked at the policy. He had about 3 suggestions. They were basically minor things. Include a fax number. Fix your email address. They were little bitty things. So Sonia communicated with me, can we fix the policy? She sent me the stuff. I went in, because I had the original Word version of this document. She did not. So I went in and I made all the changes that Lee Pope suggested. In doing that, I noticed in the version I had, it said, cannot make photos. And I thought, I thought we changed that. So I went into my computer, into all the resolutions that we passed, and I found a resolution from May of 2007, I think it was May, 2017, that involved this issue and had language in it that allowed taking pictures with smartphones and stuff. But the version I had was unsigned. So I wasn't I had developed a resolution that you all considered, but I couldn't tell from my computer whether you passed it. So I mentioned it to Sonia, and she said, I don't think they passed that. And I said, I don't know, I have some memory of this getting changed. So I went to Rick Spence, and I said, Rick, I think this got changed. Can you try to find these? He searched and found the resolution where the policy was passed, but he could not find the resolution where that one thing was changed to allow photographs. So I took it back out, because I could not establish that that had been adopted. So I went back to, you can't do it, and that's why what you're looking at says you can't do it. Commissioner Stevens is saying, I don't think that complies with the state law. So, in my memory is you passed it. So I can't explain why Rick Spence can't find the resolution, or my memory's wrong.
So your comment was, you're good with this if that's out?
Well, if it allows them to take pictures, they have a state-given right to take photographs or photostats of these records. And this county commission cannot take away a state-given right.
All right, let's take that out and change it and move on.
As Josh has written.
Yes.
I have the exact language that was discussed in 2017 that can be put right in that section D.
Yeah, is that what I read?
Is it the right
I
one?
think we have a judge back there.
Cameron, you got a hand
We
up
got a
there.
judge back there.
Mr.
That's the
Bratcher.
language.
John Bratcher, Clerk and Master of Chancery Court. The idea to bump this, to take a look at all of these issues, I think is probably a good one, because each of the fee offices has a particular statute with regard to charging for copies. And I just think that needs to be taken into consideration. I mean, it's different from the general statutes with regard to charging copies of 15 cents and that sort of thing. Because the fee offices have certain, regard to the courts, has a statute with regard to what you can charge for a copy. And while it's not a huge revenue stream for the Chancery Court. It is part of our revenue. If somebody wants to come in and bring their scanner in and scan 1,000 pages, that could be problematic. But I'm not saying I'm for or against what you're saying, Mr. Stevens. I'm just saying, I think when that's considered by the county attorney and then by the committee, you need to remember that there are other statutes out there that affect.
Well, this one only applies to county general, and if we're going to err, I want to err on the side of caution. But, so do we have a motion to defer earlier on this?
Not on this. That was the last.
So what's the will of the committee?
Motion to defer.
And second.
Do you have a question?
I just want to know if you wanted us to bring anything back to you.
Is the instruction
Is
to
this
reinvest
accurate?
in making sure there was
What's on here, is this
nothing was
why?
passed, and to look at the minutes and stuff to
No.
figure out why this,
Not what he's saying. Is this
why our
policy
memories
on-
are not corresponding with what Rick's
Most
finding.
definitely check.
Well, they're
I
gonna
think
do
that's
it.
it, Josh. I think
Look at all the minutes.
Most definitely.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, all in favor of the motion to defer, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next agenda item. Resolution from Greene County Clerk regarding appointed position of clerk and master becoming an elected position. Mayor Ketron had put this on our agenda, and my understanding is that the Greene County Commission passed a resolution that they wanted their clerk to send to everybody in the state, every county in the state, to ask their legislators to make the clerk and master's office elected by the people instead of appointed by the chancellor as the way it is now. That's all that I know. I think the thing is on your iPad. We have the clerk and master here. He's made his presence known a minute ago. Mayor, clerk.
Well, that came from Greene County, Mr. Chairman, and of course, anytime counties pass resolutions, they'll do it many times. It's gone on before. They'll send it to other commissions to see if they'd be willing to support the same thing as far as changing it. And I believe, John, you all have an association, statewide association that you belong to, so you may be more in tune to address the commission on what their association is either for or against. But I feel compelled anytime that another commission sends us something that it should come before the committee at their request.
Well, this is kind of like the change in the Constitution for that property tax abatement. My understanding is the Constitution allows the chancellor to appoint the clerk and master for a 6-year term. So this isn't something where the legislature just says we're going to take that away and make this elected for a 4-year term like the circuit court clerk. You'd have to go through the whole process of amending the Constitution, and I didn't see that in their resolution. But Mr. Clerk, do you have any comments or things you'd like to add?
Can I come over and address?
Well, sure, have a seat. Come over, have a seat, please.
Seems like it ought to be 11 o'clock.
Getting close.
It feels like it. First of all, I know some of you folks and some of you we haven't met, but I'm John Bratcher, clerk and master of the Chancery Court, and I've been in this position since 1992. I've been a practicing attorney and have had this position for over 26 years. Some of you may know that, well, let me back up. I can tell you why we're here, first of all, and then I have an explanation with regard to what a clerk and master does. The reason that we're here is that in Greene County, the clerk and master sued the mayor and the county commission because she felt like she didn't have enough help. Now, there is, in our county, an ongoing suit that the clerk and master has had against the mayor, technically, for decades. When I came on, we simply changed the parties. with Mr. Mankin, Ms. Allen, Mr. Burgess, and now Mr. Ketron.
I didn't know that.
Oh, you're going to be,
You've just been served.
you're going to be a defendant. I can tell you, in all those years, the suit has been settled by order, agreed order, and I know Mr. McAdoo knows me and has been on the commission for a long time. Mr. Reed has been here, and we sit down and go through the regular budget process, and never even thought about suing anyone. I can tell you that a clerk of the court, I can't speak for other people, the clerk of the circuit court or chancery court is not going to sue, that is, make it an active lawsuit, until they have exhausted every possible means to try to get the help that they might need. And the lady who was in Greene County, Kay Solomon Armstrong, has been there as long as I have. And I know that she exhausted every means to try to get some help. She was asking for a part-time person. And so she felt like that her office was suffering. She wasn't getting any help. And so she sued. Well, guess what? She won. Now, the reason she won, most likely, is that for years she had been going to the commission and asking and building up her basically her case with her statistics and so forth, and then they just said no, so she goes and sues. Well, the judge is going to look at it and see all this information, so she won. And it's on appeal, and it's likely that she's probably going to win that one too. So, quite frankly, they were mad at her. And they looked at the possibility of somehow getting rid of her. And so this was after they looked at it, poked it at the bit, this was the method that they chose. Quite frankly, I think it was basically for spite. Now, I know that I've talked with some of you over the years, and you know how I feel about Rutherford County and the county commission. I've always said that we're progressively conservative. In other words, we try to provide what the county needs, but still watch the dimes and the pennies and the dollars. And I think that's what we've done. I think that's what you all have done over the years to build schools. We needed to even put off this judicial building for several years to build schools, which was a wise, from my point of view, was the best choice. So we live in we live in a really great county, and I've never had to deal with this kind of issue. I've come and explained my position. Sometimes I maybe ask for too much, and I'm told, well, we can look at that another time. But we always got along and worked through it, and supported my office, and I had no problems. But that's not the way it is all across the state, unfortunately. I had someone from another county in West Tennessee tell me that they had their emergency medical agency had gotten an A rating in their, by whatever associations raised them, and they went back to the commission and thought, well, this was to show that we're good, we have an A rating, that perhaps maybe should get a little more funding. Well, they decided that maybe they didn't need an A rating, and B rating was good enough. So that's the kind of thing that other people face, unfortunately, and we haven't faced that. I haven't faced that here. With regard to the clerk and master, the clerk court of the circuit court doesn't have the duties that the clerk and master does. The clerk is basically clerical. I have that hat as well as another hat. Basically, I'm appointed to do duties that are similar to what the chancellor performs, and I perform those duties at his direction. For example, I have a docket at least twice a week. I hear temporary support and custody matters for not only the chancellor but all the circuit judges who do civil matters as well. I represent the chancellor and those judges, and it's important for me, for them, for me to be on the same sheet of music as the chancellor and the judges. So this is basically a semi-judicial position. It's not meaning someone else in another office as far as the clerk is concerned, because everybody has plenty on their plate. I have some of those same duties as well as many others. So, are there any questions?
I got one. So where's your Tennessee Association? Are they in favor of what Greene County is doing or not?
No, sir.
Okay, they're not?
They're not.
Okay, because that's important.
Yeah.
If you're not getting statewide, support for what Greene County's doing, because it's so complicated to change the Constitution, it would have to go through 2 general assemblies, which is 4 years, 2 years apiece, and then be placed on the following gubernatorial election. So you're looking at 8 years to change the Constitution, to go before the people be put on statewide ballot. So I'm not sure how long she's going to stay there, but I think the system that we have now is not to allow just to be run for public office.
Okay. Any comments or information from the committee? I don't think this is a priority for us, so I don't see a need for us to take action on it personally. But okay, members, on your iPads you'll find the monthly litigation list for your review. We don't need to go through that unless anybody has any questions about it. Any questions about the litigation list? All right. Any other business? Ms. Moore, welcome back. I know that she had asked to be under other business for an issue the school board is working on.
Nothing like being last in a long meeting. So Commissioners, thank you. Commissioner Stevens, thank you for allowing me to be here. I know we're not formally on the agenda with this, and it was something that came up during our board meeting last week. So I wanted to go ahead and come and just present it very quickly, the idea to the steering committee, in hopes that this is something that you all can take back and consider, and perhaps we can get addressed at the next meeting. The reason I wanted to go ahead and bring it forward tonight is because it is a real timely sort of thing as far as the state legislature and things that are coming up. As I think all of you are aware, and I think most of us have great concern about pending legislation that we're possibly going to be looking at in the state this year regarding vouchers and the public school, or the school spending accounts that they're talking about now, which essentially are the same thing as vouchers. We made a decision in our board meeting last week that we are going to write a resolution to present to our legislative body regarding our position on vouchers, and the city school board is going to be partnering with us on this. And so what I'm here tonight to ask is that the commission would consider also partnering with us. We know that there's power in numbers, obviously, and you all are our funding body, and it's a huge budget that you're responsible for, and we get that. And we don't have time to take a deep dive into it tonight, but of course the vouchers and the idea that this would perpetuate in terms of taking funding away from your public school systems here is of great concern to all of us. So I have brought to you, we had held a meeting with the legislators back in December. Some of you were able to attend, some of you were not, but we presented all of them with some materials, and I brought enough for all of you this evening. And yes, I know, good bedtime reading, right? Either that or you can put it on your nightstand and it doesn't need a paperweight, that's for sure. Nor do we need do have a couple. What you have got here essentially is, the top 2 pages are the position statement, if you will, or issue brief from the TSBA, the Tennessee School Board Association. Could we get one from the other? Mayor, did you get one at our meeting? Did you get one at our meeting?
Thank you.
The TSBA lays out here, of course, the position on school vouchers and why we believe they're such a bad idea. And then you also have a couple of very pertinent studies here that were done as well regarding kind of the Washington, the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program and evaluation of that, as well as, well, let me find it here. Yeah, the DC Opportunity Scholarship, and then I'm trying to remember the name of the other one, but it's not necessarily pertinent. But anyway, I know that it's late, and I don't know that we have time for questions or discussion tonight, not formally on the agenda. I'm not sure how the timing of this is going to work, because we are going to be under the gun in getting this resolution completed in time to get it to the legislature before these things start going in for votes. So Jeff Reed, our attorney, is in the process of drafting that resolution for us now. The school board will look at it and we'll vote on it next week. And then at that point, I would like to have the opportunity to bring it back to the commission to have it looked at for, I assume this is something that would require a full vote if the commission was going to agree to be a part of that resolution with us.
So we can add you to our agenda next month too.
Yes, happy to entertain any questions if you got them this evening, or if not, I would welcome any of you, any of the commissioners, please don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call. I'm the Tennessee Legislative Network rep for the school board, but certainly you can call any of our school board members, Director Spurlock. We're all pretty well versed in this voucher subject and would be more than happy to speak to it or help with any questions that you might have.
Any more questions from Ms. Moore?
I got one, Ms. Moore. Considering how high of a standard we have right now with our Rutherford County schools, do you foresee this being a problem?
Absolutely. If it passes, if the legislation passes, and one of the bills that's presented right now, I think all of you are aware that there was legislation that was passed, is it 2 sessions ago, that opened the door to allow for publicly funded vouchers for students with IEPs or SPED students. And the legislation that's on the floor right now that's been presented by Senator Gresham is actually going to open the door to take that piece of legislation that is already in place and open it up for any students that were not in the public school systems the last year, so i.e. homeschool students and private school students, to take advantage of those same vouchers. So when you look at the dollars that could potentially pull, that we're going to, and you as our funding body are going to have to figure out a way to refund those dollars, or we're going to have to start cutting programs, is essentially what it will boil down to. So the way it's presented now, and Commissioner Harris, to your point, I think that you're getting at, no, Rutherford County has one of the best school systems in the state, and I'm really proud to be able to sit up here and say that. The vouchers aren't needed here. I would propose that they're not needed anywhere, but that's another conversation for another day. There are other solutions to the problems. But to pull that funding away from a school system like Rutherford County, with the way that we're performing and the fact that we attract industry here every day because of our educational system, would be so detrimental. However, if it's passed for the entire state, Rutherford County is going to be subject to it.
Well, we'll look forward to the discussion next month with the actual text of what the school board passed, and we'll be happy to look into that.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Any other business to bring before the committee? I have one question that I would like to ask. I had a question for the mayor.
Sure.
I was kind of confused, and I want to be sure I'm 100% clear on how a committee agenda is made. And I want to figure out, does the committee chairman make the agenda? Does the mayor's office make the agenda? How do we do this?
Well, the way it's been told to me, I'll have to ask Vicki, but the way it's been told to me that you make the submission and then it comes to the county mayor for final approval, and the county mayor still has approval to add things to that agenda. I'll verify that tomorrow for you.
Well, yeah, I would like to know where the approval process came. I thought the committee chairman made the agenda, and I just wanted to be sure everybody's on the same page, because that was kind of shocking to me. I did not know that.
Okay. Like I say, it's my 5th month, so I'll be happy to verify that. That's how it's been told to me.
Well, it's my 2nd week on the job here, so
Okay.
I'm trying to be sure everybody's on the
I
same
think
page.
it's your first meeting, right?
So, not my first one, but I never have made an agenda before. It doesn't seem intuitive it doesn't seem intuitive to me to call the mayor's office to ask to send out a legislative committee agenda, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around how that makes sense, but that's another issue.
How other chairmen do it?
How?
Over the prior years, I think, got another chairman here. What I do, and has been doing, if I have something for the agenda, I'll call Vicky to get it put on the agenda. The county mayor, he has something for the agenda, he also puts it on the agenda. Prior to the meeting, or prior to that agenda going out, county mayor and I will meet and look at the agenda. We'll decide on what need to be on the agenda, what information we have, and so on and so forth. And then, based on our agreement, we send the agenda out. All right?
That's why you and I've been doing.
Yeah. And so, I don't know of any
I
other
don't know
way.
if there's any other rule or anything in that policy. I don't know.
So really, it's an agreement on both parties. In other words, I don't look for the county mayor to say, this is what we sending out. And whatever you say doesn't mean ill beans, but it's an agreement on both parties. Once we agree, we look at the agenda, we send it out.
The way I've done it, I mean, I'm sort of like you. I'm new to this job too. I became chairman after the election, whatever, but I've basically tried to follow my predecessor. And I basically call in and say, this is what I'm wanting on the agenda, where we go. And we have a process in public safety as the one who presented first the last time when our different departments, they moved to the bottom of the list. And that's the way that's why that's always worked. That way it gives everybody the opportunity to be first at some time. And if you mess that up, you find out real quick that you messed up. Because I took his place one time as vice chairman, and somebody was supposed to have been first and they still remained last. And I heard that real quick before the meeting ever got going real well. So I learned as coming on as chairman, that's what I had to do. But I would call in, make that agenda and go from there. But now, and I think we have done this, that I would either call or ask to meet with you to go over the agenda to see if there's anything else to be worked with or done from there. So there's another chairman
Yeah.
here too.
The health and ed agenda is pretty straightforward every month. I don't think it hardly ever changes. That occasionally there will be something to be added. And so I guess it's never really been an issue for me. It's just always pretty much been the same. So.
I think call John and tell him he's first next time.
Okay, well, I'd like to look into getting the answer to that question, on who actually has the final say on the agenda. But we can do that another time if it's late. So, any other business?
I have a parting comment.
Beat you, I'm gonna.
Well, I'm gonna stand up and read my note. For you. I'm like the mayor and a few others, we're newbies here. And I have been in contact with different departments, or tried to, and sometimes it was a little difficult to get through to people or get return phone calls. And when I brought up the background checks, I think Sonia went home that night and may have worked on it when she got home, because it was very quickly she came up with, I just thought was outstanding. Even if we weren't comparing it to the other one. I just thought it was outstanding, but the efficiency, I mean, it's like she just jumped all over it. We had it the next week. I have called Sonia and have yet to get her on the phone. She's yet to not call me back, and I just want to say that publicly. And I know you have a lot on your plate, and you taking your time to talk to me, answer my question or whatever, is invaluable, and I appreciate you being that way. So, that was it.
All right. Any other comments or questions? If not,
I move we adjourn.
We're adjourned. So,